across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Thank you to Russell. 3 minutes after 1 o'clock. Welcome to the home of common sense. It's a Friday, kids, and we are absolutely chocker at this end. Coming up on the programme, ministers are urging reforms to tackle rising mental health benefit claims. Liz Kendall, of course, in charge of this department, warning against writing people off, and a councillor facing a backlash over controversial remarks. We'll be speaking to that councillor in around about half an hour on the programme. Also this afternoon, warnings of a potential stagflation crisis grow as the UK faces stagnant growth paired with high inflation, raising concerns over economic resilience and household finances. So interest rates go down a little bit. How much longer will they remain down? It's a tricky picture. Details to come. And, as you've been hearing, the Science Museum's guide controversially claims Lego reinforces heteronormative ideas. But the brand continues to champion its gender-neutral ethos, stating everybody can enjoy its creativity. If you've got the Quentin Crisp edition of Lego, you'll know what nonsense this is. Everything you need to know, 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. This is Talk. What do we got here? Why is the nation too sick to work? We've asked this question in a variety of forms. Probably over the last couple of years, it comes up from time to time. The number of people economically inactive because of long-term sickness is over, well, it's nearer 3 million. I mean, we're getting to the 3 million people are on long-term sick in this country. 3 million people. Apparently, some younger people now see stress as a reason not to go to work. A day's work is stressful, and therefore you don't go if you're feeling a little bit stressed. This is called life, right? I mean, this is called what happens when you're alive as a human being. You have great days, you have tricky days, you have uncomfortable days, you have sad days, you have really happy days, you have euphoric days. Within that strata of emotions and experiences, sometimes a little bit of stress. Some people now see a day's work as stressful, and far more of the long-term sick should be in jobs, according to the Work and Pensions Secretary. Liz Kendall said long-term sickness could not be seen as an automatic reason not to go to work. There'll be lots of people listening to this who have a variety of ailments and issues who still go to work. I mean, lots of people work. You know, you work with disabled people, you work with people who've got an ongoing issue. I work with people who are terminally ill. I mean, the list goes on, right? More than 2.4 million people are getting the highest level of incapacity benefits with no, this is the interesting bit, no requirement to seek work. Ministers are scrambling to fix what they call a broken welfare system. Do you know, I think since I've been alive, the welfare system has been broken. The welfare system now does stuff it perhaps never set out to do originally. The welfare system has attempted to be a sort of one-size-kind-of-fits-all model where everybody can get the help regardless. Now, look, this isn't and you have to say this caveat. You shouldn't have to, but you kind of do. So when you talk about the long-term sick and the fact that there are clearly too many people that are long-term sick, that doesn't in any way decry people who are genuinely long-term sick. And if you are genuinely long-term sick and you need help, then I'm more than happy, delighted in fact. It's an endorsement of the civility of a first world country that we assist people who are long-term sick, right? There's nothing that shouldn't need to be said, all right? I'm going to put that out there because somebody will be scribing a text as we speak going, I cannot believe you're saying that sick people are lazy or whatever. Over the past 5 years, the proportion of applicants approved for the most valuable claims has surged to 50%, leading to a projected welfare overspend of £8.6 billion. I shudder to think what this black hole that Labour keep banging on about, what's that going to look like when they come out of office? Previous figures have shown that 69% of universal credit health claims involve mental health problems, 48% cite back and joint pain, 20% relate to heart disease. So 69% of universal credit health claims involve mental health. I mean, this is a staggering figure. Nearly 3 million people out of workforce due to long-term health problems. So that goes from the age of 16. Why is the nation too sick? Can you shine some light on this for me? And what do we do about this? 0344 499 1000. And yes, it does come up a lot. The welfare bill is absolutely enormous. It's unsustainable and it's growing. So we've currently got an 8.6 billion overspend. Nobody is, and I'm going to say it again, just so it's really clear, nobody is disputing that some people are in a bad way and need assistance. Again, I think I speak for nearly every civilised person. We're only too happy to assist and jump in to help somebody who really needs the help. I'm struggling with this figure of 3 million. I'm really struggling with that. 70% of those claims involve mental health problems. Now, that's a whole, almost another conversation about how have we got to this place. How do you define what is a mental health problem? Or as the Reform UK councillor said, who we will be speaking to in a bit, it's kind of the new bad back. I've got anxiety, I'm feeling stressed. And I felt stressed this morning, oddly. I had a load of, a load of stuff just all happens at the same time. You know, you get an email, I've got to reply to then the phone goes, and then you've got to, there's an application you've got to fill out. I haven't paid the kids swimming lessons. All of that, all the usual things, all happens at once, all happened in about 8 minutes. Suddenly this cluster of nonsense descended upon me like a dark cloud from the gods, and there I was, this helpless human in the midst of this shower of shizzle that rained down on my day before I'd really got started. I didn't at any point go, do you know what, I can't go to work today. I'm having a heck of a time. It never occurred to me. And if I have a day off, there's going to be a good reason. In fact, when I take a day off, it's because I've booked a day off. It's rarely because I'm ill. 0344 499 1000. Just tell me, what do you make of the bigger story here about our nation, about mental health? What that's done? I mean, everyone uses COVID as this kind of moment in time. It's kind of, we used to say AD, BC. Now it's sort of BC meaning before COVID and AC meaning after, as if that's the barometer of where everything went wrong. A lot of things did go wrong at that time, by the way. You close down a nation for 2 or 3 years, then stuff tends to go wrong. But what have we bred? A load of people that just like staying at home? Do young people, and I think there is an issue here, and it's not just young people, by the way. I think young people get a bad rap on this. Lots of age groups who genuinely think that anxiety is, a bit of anxiety is it's a mental health problem. Well, I mean, neurologically or psychologically, it comes under the umbrella, but I don't think you could say, it's up there with, a bit of bipolar or something. We're in troubled times. Shout us up on this one, 0344 499 1000. Why is the UK too sick to work? Charlie Downs, the political commentator, is back with us. How are you doing, Charlie?
I'm very well, Ian. How are you?
Good. Good to see you as well. I mean, these figures are extraordinary. I mean, these are not like numbers that you look at and go, oh, well, they go up, they go down. I mean, these are disturbing and they're only going in one direction.
It's very interesting, this story, right? Because I remember distinctly about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Tony Blair was out saying the same thing. He was saying that the UK needs to stop medicalising the ups and downs of life and stop self-diagnosing with these mental health problems, and therefore, because it's too much of a strain on the economy. Then we see today, these calls from the government to, get these people back in work. And it's just very interesting, the pipeline from things that Blair says to things that this government is doing.
Indeed.
But let's put that to one side for the minute. I think this mental health conversation is one that's been, it's been brewing for a very long time. As a child of the 21st century, this is a culture that I've been immersed in really for as long as I can remember. I've always known people who have blamed their mental health for, the bad things in their life, blamed their mental health even when they do things that hurt other people. They say it wasn't me, it was my, it was my depression, it was my anxiety, whatever else. It's used as a kind of crutch. And I'm not saying that mental health problems don't exist. Obviously they do. I know plenty of people. I've struggled with it myself, as everybody has. But there needs to be a conversation about the way in which it's been turned into, and this story story really illustrates it. It's been turned into an excuse. Now, I used to be of the mind that really, you know, it was about just pulling yourself up and getting a grip. And whilst I do think that that is true to an extent still, I do also think there needs to be a conversation about the conditions that have created this kind of epidemic, especially among young people, because you can look at the top line stuff, you can look at the food we're eating, you can look at the entertainment we're consuming, you can look at, you know, the economic situation, the work that is available in this country, where I think a lot of young people feel really that they're kind of soulless cogs in a machine. You know, they don't feel a sense of purpose and place in the work that they do. That's not good for your mental health. Again, the food and this sort of thing, I mean, we underestimate really. I mean, RFK Jr. in America is really leading the charge on this with his crusade against seed oils and the nonsense that's added to our food. But then there is the deeper issue. You know, there's a reason that Gen Z, you know, my generation, have been so drawn, so kind of vulnerable to the kind of identity politics peddled by the left. There's a reason that that's been so big over the last 10 or so years. And that's because we're a generation without identity. That's because we're a generation that's crying out for a sense of belonging and a sense of place and a sense of personhood and a sense of individuality.
Where has that come? I mean, that's a really interesting point. Where has that come from, though? I mean, who do we point the finger at on
Well,
that?
I think it's a real combination of things, because the first thing to say is, you know, these people who decry identity politics as such, I think they get it wrong, because people need identity. You need identity to have a sense of integration, a sense of place, a sense of purpose, and a sense of, again, a sense of individuality. And I think that a big part of the problem is it's actually, in my opinion, not to, you know, we could talk about this all day, I think, but it goes back to the kind of the moral order that came into being in the aftermath of the Second World War, where, you know, the rightful fear of fascism and Nazism led us to kind of go so far in the other direction, where, you know, individual self-expression was held up as the ultimate good. What that's actually done is it's dissolved the bonds of kinship.
It's completely splintered.
Exactly.
Everything.
You know, all relationships have become transactional and contractual rather than, you know, covenantal, where they would have been before, where there's a kind of qualitative, non-rational aspect to our relationships, where it's not just about profit and loss, where it's not just quantitative. We've lost that. And, you know, I think a lot of this is because, you know, you look at Margaret Thatcher, for instance, you know, a lot of people are still wedded to her memory, and they think that she was nothing but a good thing for this nation. And I think that that's probably true to an extent. But I think people underestimate the extent to which her kind of economic philosophy, and we're talking about Labour's economic philosophy today, her economic philosophy, the way that it dissolved those kind of intermediary institutions between people, that actually, you know, that was what society was made up of. And because we've lost that, we've become so atomised, so individual, that
so
actually
it was almost an unintended consequence of her kind of Big Bang and everything that happened.
Yes.
That this sort of splintered everyone, and now everyone is scrambling for an identity. Can't always find one.
Yes.
You've got to live your life through the prism of your identity. That is your sacred, your oracle of Delphi, your centre point, your bullseye. You know, my identity is everything, but I don't really know what it means. Doesn't mean anything. I don't know who I am, where I belong. Whereas previously there was an obvious set and a subset within the system where you could identify the cogs.
Yeah, and this is to say nothing of the way in which British identity has been systematically deconstructed and derided. I remember when I was in school, British identity was defined through British values, so-called, and this was something that kind of emerged during New Labour and then was codified by the Conservatives in the 2010s, and it defines, you know, the totality of British identity. This island that has a continuous history of over 1,000 years is defined as democracy, the rule of law, tolerance, and respect. Right, and that's not a real identity. That's so thin, it's so devoid of content, and I think people need that sense of nationhood, community.
So all of that, this is a kind of long way of saying, but correctly long way, if that makes sense, of saying that a lot of young people's anxiety is it real? Is it misplaced?
I think that it is real, but I think that people point to the wrong things as the cause. People are looking at symptoms, they're looking at downstream things, when actually I think the principal cause, I mean, again, we could go into this all day, but it's a loss of national identity, it's a loss of community. I would actually go as far as to say it's a loss of faith, it's a sense of, a kind of godlessness in modern society, and it's left people feeling like they're just wandering through the wilderness. And I think, you know, people turn to things things like...
And can't buy a house.
Yeah, exactly. And this, again, there's so much more to this. There is the work element of it, the way in which people are in these air-conditioned, brightly lit offices, day in, day out. They never see sunlight, they go home, they eat rubbish food and all this sort of thing. And I don't mean to sound so negative, but this is the culture we're living in. And these are all factors that are contributing to this mental health epidemic. So I think there's part of it that can be laid at the feet of those people who are being a little bit pathetic. That is definitely one thing. But we can't write it all off as that, because there are legitimate reasons in this day and age.
Yeah, so as a society, as a people, as a collective, we've splintered out, and we're now paying for that kind of that experiment. Part of the pie chart that you're kind of referring to there, lots of different reasons, is the benefit system itself as well. That would be on. It's worth having a listen to this clip. We've played this before. This was Fraser Nelson. He made a documentary for Channel 4 called Sick Note Britain, and this brilliantly highlights one of the problems with the system.
So you're working part-time now, and you're getting long-term sickness benefit. So what's the combination of those two compared to when you were working full-time with no benefits?
It's no different. So I'm probably working half the hours for the same money.
Right. So there's no financial incentive for you to get out of a situation at all?
None at all. None at all.
So why are you here? Why are you talking to me?
Because I wanted to highlight how bad things are.
Well, if I was him, I'd have kept my mouth shut, frankly, because his file was probably opened just after that went out on air. But the point, he makes a very good point. The system is knackered. Ian Duncan Smith spent ages, firstly in opposition before 2010, and then was back in the cabinet, attempting to try and address this. And he wanted to address this for the good of individuals. This wasn't about saving money for the country. He knew that it was upside down, that the whole system was not fit for purpose, and it still isn't.
Yeah, well, there is a conversation to be had about the incentive structure created by the welfare state. Now, I'm actually very much in favour of the existence of the welfare state. I think that it's the sign of a well-civilised country that you have a kind of safety net so that you prevent, Britain in the 21st century, there shouldn't be homeless people on the streets of Britain. I think it's just absurd that we're still seeing that, and at such scale. There are thousands of homeless people in this country. I think, do we not have, our economy is in a bad place, and our, obviously with mass immigration, we just can't cope with the number of people in the country. But in principle, why in the 21st century does Britain have homeless people? Why does it have people living in really, really bad conditions when we very clearly have the means and the capital to actually ameliorate some of those sorts of situations? So I think the welfare state as such is a good thing, but it's when it is... I'll give you an example, right? The way in which single motherhood is subsidised. Now, there would be those that would say, well, single motherhood's a terrible situation to be in, and it most certainly is. But it's the way that our system, by subsidising single motherhood, you actually incentivise it, right? And that's not a good thing. And this principle of, looking at the incentives created, I think applies all the way down, because you're going to find, inevitably, people who you can earn more money on benefits than working. Well, the choice is obvious. It's just a calculation, right? And I think there needs to be definitely a conversation about that as well.
Charlie, stay with us. Lots more still to come. We'll talk about what they're calling stagflation. More on that, and also the issues surrounding who we can't deport from our own country, and of course the Lego story. Why would we not talk about the Lego story? It's just too good not to talk about. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news, your thoughts on this one. Why is the UK too sick to work? 0344 499 1000.
So we need to get back to basics. When someone turns up here illegally, you've got to send them straight back, Mike. And if you find someone on the street, you've got to send them straight back. You've got to do that really, really quickly and not mess about. And we haven't. We've created this bureaucracy, this machinery, which enables lawyers to get migrants into a bureaucratic process, and delay for them is victory. The longer they can delay the case, the more likely it is that person's going to get to stay in the end, no matter what they've done.
Exactly right.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's have a listen to this. Charlie Downs is still with us, by the way. A Pakistani man convicted of child sex offences initially avoided deportation on human rights ground, with a tribunal controversially citing family ties and difficulties he would face in Pakistan. Let's have a listen to Tory MP Robert Jenrick speaking on The Sun's Never Mind the Ballots in regards to the deportation of foreign criminals.
I think there's yet another absolutely disgraceful case. The public are right to think that our immigration system is rigged in the interests of people who mean us harm, illegal migrants, against the interests of the British public. We've got to change our human rights architecture in this country so you can get these people out of the country as quickly as possible. That's a case I've made time and again, and I want us to take it forward.
Here's the thing, Charlie. So this man was convicted of horrific child sex offences with young girls. He'd argued, he blamed his crimes due to the fact that his wife was pregnant and there was no intimacy at home. So he had to go and find some children to
As one
abuse.
does.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I think this is the same guy that at one point said he was gay, so he couldn't go back to Pakistan. He's got all sorts of... I mean, this is a wrong one. If you can't deport somebody like that, something has gone... I mean, I don't use this word lightly, horrifically wrong with the system.
Well, we were talking before about the kind of post-World War II moral paradigm that we've occupied for the last 80 years. And this doctrine of human rights is a kind of real fundamental, kind of foundational aspect of that. Because this concept emerges in the aftermath of the Second World War, quite understandably, given the horrors inflicted across Europe during that time. So this idea that actually all humans do have this fundamental set of rights that are inviolable and which will be enforced with the backing of the courts, the international courts, and actually more importantly the might of the emerging American empire, effectively. Today, this doctrine of human rights has atrophied into, it's just not fit for purpose, and it's not fit for the modern day, because what we're looking at now is not a situation where there's genocide taking place on the continent because of a tyrannical regime. What we have now is people fleeing parts of the world that I certainly want to live in. Certainly wouldn't want to live in. I say fleeing. They are leaving by choice, and they are being allowed to leave parts of the world that I wouldn't want to live in, that are not great, and they are travelling across Europe to go to Britain because they know that in Britain they won't be punished for committing crimes like crossing the border, and they might actually get rewarded for it because they can claim benefits, they can claim social housing, they'll be put up in hotels and all the rest of it. And so this idea, I really think that until a mainstream political party is prepared to take aim at the doctrine of human rights as such, we're not going to get anywhere. Because all the while we're trapped in this mind prison of being too afraid, because human rights is such a nice sounding kind of thing. That no one's prepared to come out against it. But actually we have to look at how it's actually interfacing with reality. And the way that it's interfacing with reality is it's preventing us from removing criminals of the lowest order from our country who have no business being here in the first place. And if that's not infringing on people's human rights, then I don't know what is.
And I would extend, I mean, it does, and to be chucked out of the country if you're not meant to be here and if you've committed a crime. I mean, if somebody nicked a mobile phone and didn't snatch it, I'd say they would go as well, frankly.
Yes.
It shouldn't just be horrendous sexual predators and paedophiles and killers, which we see way too many of. My list would be extensive in those. I have no idea what a judge looks like. Look, I know I'm not a legal brain, Charlie, but really, a judge looks at this and goes, yeah, we think it might be tricky if we sent this guy back.
Yeah, and on that point as well, what we cannot forget is there is a quite robust network of human rights lawyers who make their money keeping people like this in the country. And sure, everybody has a right to a legal defence and all the rest of it. But actually, if you look into some of these characters who are doing this, their explicit business is finding these loopholes, is encouraging their clients to say things like they're gay, so that they won't be deported
100%.
back to their home countries where they throw gay people off of roofs and this sort of thing.
Exactly, and culturally, I mean, if you want to, get an idea or a gauge, and I know it's not necessarily, this is not exclusive to somebody of Pakistani background, we do see partners and spouses weirdly defend their other halves at a time when you think you're standing by them. The wife blamed herself for his crimes due to a lack of intimacy.
Well, Ian, this is where this conversation...
He was attacking children.
This is where this gets difficult, and this is where we enter thorny territory. But it has to be said that, this doctrine of human rights that regards every single person as an individual fundamentally gets it wrong. Because actually group identity, as much as this might make people uncomfortable, it does actually matter when you're looking at a person and looking at their behaviour. Because when are we going to have a conversation in this country about this specific, what Keir Starmer would call a community? When are we going to have a proper conversation about the seemingly endemic problem with paedophilia in the Pakistani Muslim community in Britain? Because, we know about the grooming gangs of, 50-plus towns and cities in Britain where young girls were being systematically trafficked. And, I mean, I don't know what words I'm allowed to use on daytime television, but you know what I'm getting at.
Sure.
Just the most horrific crimes, some of the most horrific crimes that have ever taken place on British soil. And I count, among that, the Viking raids and, the harrying of the north by the Normans and all this sort of thing. This is horrific, barbaric, evil stuff. And it's all seemingly, a lot of it, the majority of it, is coming out of one community. For instance, the case of Charlene Downs, which actually was one of my first real introductions to politics, because when you're a kid, you Google your own name. I Google my name, Charlie Downs. What comes up is the case of Charlene Downs. I read that when I was a teenager, and I was like, my goodness, this kind of thing is happening on British soil.
Yeah.
And I think the Pakistani Muslim population of Blackpool, where that happened, was less than 4% when that happened. So it didn't take many of these people to be in that town for something so horrific to happen. And this is not, to be clear, about hating people. It's not about hating individual people and wishing ill on people, but it's about looking at the fact that this community has been brought here as part of government policy, and the way that they have responded to the generosity of the British people and the British state is to engage in some of the most horrific crimes, conceivable.
The Pakistani community, if that is the right word, would say, look, this isn't all of us, this is a small subset of people. It's grooming gangs as distinct from other forms of abuse. It comes under that umbrella. Whatever you want to make of it, that would be something that would be pointed out.
It's a minority, that is true, but when does it reach the point where it's so much of a pattern that there has to be a question asked about, well, what exactly is going on in this community, especially with the covering up from spouses and relatives and so on.
And I want to Charlie, bring in this final story. I know it's been talked about a lot today. The Science Museum has sparked debate by suggesting that Lego might reinforce heteronormative ideas and the gender binary, citing how many describe the bricks as having male and female parts. However, Lego has long championed inclusivity, which you might not know, emphasising its gender-neutral appeal throughout their adverts. Have a listen to one of their campaigns.
Toys were very gendered. Boys played with this and girls played with that. So for myself, growing up as a kid, I loved playing with Lego bricks because it didn't matter. They weren't really for boys. They were for girls. They were for everyone.
They were for everyone. I like a bit of Lego, and I play Lego with my kids. I've never described the bits of Lego as male and female, like you might do with a jack lead. When you're in the engineering world, they're often described as male to male, female to male. Plumbing world, I think, fairly similar. I've never said to my 6-year-old, you pass me a male block, please, or a female block. That would be weird.
I just feel so bad for the kids that are coming up now, because I grew up on Lego. I was absolutely obsessed with Lego when I was a kid.
Great.
And I still have a lot of it. It's great. It's in the loft, but, you know, I'll keep it for my kids because it's great stuff. And I just feel so lucky that I was never exposed to this kind of nonsense when I was a kid, because we were just talking about paedophilia. I'm sorry, why are we actually even talking about a kind of a sexualized view of what amounts to a children's toy? Why is that relevant? Like, sorry, like,
how
what
would somebody
here?
What kind of twisted mind decided, let's go here with this, let's create a narrative that doesn't exist, no one's ever raised it before, nobody thinks it, it's not a thing at all, but let's invent this this discussion
in the Science Museum, no less. I mean, is this really the greatest science that the United Kingdom is producing?
Well, there's a lot to see in the Science Museum, but frankly, I didn't know. I mean, it must have been a very quiet week there when they thought we've got nothing to do, and the tumbleweed was blowing past the Isaac Newton corridor of creativity, and God knows what else was going on, and someone thought, I know what we'll do, we'll say that Lego's racist. No, you can't do racist, too obvious. What about homophobic? No, it's not quite homophobic. What about sort of just anti the whole LGBT thing? Yeah, let's go for that.
And to actually get to the root of this as well, you know, because it's easy. This is obviously a ridiculous story, and it's easy to laugh at. But actually, what's being said here is that heterosexuality is somehow bad, right? And because, you know, because this idea that, oh, it being male and female is somehow wrong or oppressive or whatever else. When are we going to actually say, well, actually no, heterosexuality is the norm, and it has to be the norm, because if it's not the norm, well, you don't have a society, because you don't have children, right? You need heterosexual relationships in a society in order for that society to continue to exist.
Is that how you make kids? I didn't know this.
Well, I know, right? But the fact that this, you know, the heterosexuality and the male and female dichotomy is being decried as such, I think that needs to be called out in and of itself, because it's like, well, no, that is what builds society.
We are literally talking about the meaning of life.
Yes.
I don't think that's a sort of an insignificant or a sort of side dish story of the you know, anthropological journey of humans.
Of course.
Listen, Charlie, we hit the clock.
Wow, that went quickly.
Very quick. Charlie Downs with us here on Talk. Back to you in a couple of moments. Any of these stories, anything else you want to pick up as well? Why is the UK too sick to work? We're asking that question as well. Just gone 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, just gone 25 to 2. Let's continue then with this story. And it's extraordinary to look at the numbers and the figures involved, but we know that ministers are being urged to tackle rising mental health benefit claims. It's out of control. Liz Kendall criticising the system for writing people off. Reform councillor Oliver Freeston sparked a bit of a backlash by calling mental health struggles the modern bad back excuse. I think a lot of people would probably support that, igniting debate over support and misuse. In a moment, we're going to speak to the former Conservative Health Secretary, Stephen Dorrell. But first, let's have a word with Oliver Freeston himself, the Reform Councillor for North East Lincolnshire. Oliver, good afternoon to you.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good as gold at this end. So you made a simple comment and then the world went mad. So you woke up and thought, oh my God, I only said this thing like, as a sort of a basic comment. And then suddenly everybody's talking about it. And that's no bad thing. I mean, you're a local politician. That is your job and you've created a debate. Just explain what you meant then. It sort of explains itself, but in your own words, that mental health is the new form of the modern bad back excuse.
I think it's quite clear that mental health is a silent killer. There are genuine cases of mental health where people are taking their own lives. I mean, it's the biggest killer for men under the age of 35. But ultimately, everybody up and down the country knows that if you go to your GP and say, I've got anxiety and depression, they will sign you off work. It can't be disproved. And too many people are using it as an excuse to get out work sickness benefits. And it's costing the country fortunes. There was 18 million lost working days alone last year due to it. And what's interesting is I've had an outpouring of support, even amongst people who've said a family member, a friend has taken their own lives because they was depressed. But actually, they weren't taken seriously because people so flippantly use it and throw it around. So I think it's important that we do have this conversation. Yeah. It's maybe a political hot potato, but it looks as if now more politicians are willing to come forward. And what was really interesting is when I made the comment at the council, they said to me, you need to temper your comments and moderate your comments. Well, I've got news for you. I'm a reformer. We don't do that. We say what we think. We say what the silent majority think, and we'll continue to do it.
Well, I think even Tony Blair kind of tacitly said the same thing when he talked about medicalising everyday things like anxiety. We all get a drop of anxiety. I'm sure you sometimes wake up in the morning and, you're not feeling as tickety-boo as you felt the day before. It's called life, right?
I was anxious to come on your show. It's normal. We get on with it, and that's what we have to do. We have to dust ourselves off.
Yeah. What sort of response did you get within the council when you said you got a sort of loose telling off about moderating your language? What were the others saying? I know when you reform guys stand up and speak at a council meeting, you've got a whole room against you. We know that Nigel Farage experiences that on a weekly basis in Parliament at the moment. So you've got a difficult audience to start with. But do you think many of those people that were there, Tories, Labour supporters, Lib Dems, did they quietly agree with you?
Well, the Labour lot looked as if I'd, said about shooting their grandma or something. They looked horrified at what I'd said. The Tories, and this is what disappoints me about the Tories, they're so sly, they don't have any backbone. They stayed silent in the meeting when I made my comments. After the meeting, they came up to me, and this was two older Tory councillors as well, may I add. They said, wow, you were brave to say what you just said. And I said, oh, do you not agree? And they said, oh, no, we totally agree with you, but you can't say things like that anymore.
Wow.
Well, we need to start saying things like that. We need to say what people think. And it's a generation of politicians who have made the country how it is now.
Are you going to expand on this narrative? I mean, is this going to be an area that you want to... I don't mean just by saying the same thing every week, but are you intending to explore this area that you see as a huge problem? And I think most people do as well, if the truth be known. Is this something that's going to become a little bit of a favoured narrative for you?
Well, I've got a background in the NHS and health and social care background. This is how I know what I'm talking about, because I've seen it firsthand. I've seen the genuine cases where they get failed and let down. I've seen the people come in and they are just taking the mickey, to be frank. So it is something I'd like to expand upon. And certainly, I think as Reform with a new party, we need to be developing policies. We need to be looking at ways how we can make the government funding more efficient. So it's definitely something I'll take forward. What I find really sad is that in World War I, we had 18-year-olds fighting the Germans in the trenches, being shot at. And now we have 18-year-olds laid in bed, won't get out of bed on long-term sickness benefits because they've had a relationship breakup or they've had a bad day. We need to get tougher. We need to be more resilient. And people need to overcome the adversity of everyday life.
Listen, Oliver, very thorough stuff. Thank you. Great to speak. We will speak again as well. Oliver Freeston, who's a Reform councillor for North East Lincolnshire. Let's speak with Stephen Dorrell, former Conservative Health Secretary. Stephen, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Former Tory, now a Liberal.
I was
Democrat.
about to say yes, indeed. Do you remember when you were a young buck politician just like that?
It's a very long time ago.
Does he make a good point, though, about the bad back problem?
Well, he's certainly on to an important point, and it's something actually that across the political spectrum, the government, Liz Kendall, has been drawing attention to it as well. So it's undoubtedly true that we have more people on long-term sick than we've got more than 500,000 more than we had before COVID. And what I think is important for us to recognize and think about is that this is a problem we have in this country, but we're an outlier. If you look across the rest of Europe, there isn't actually this growth post-COVID in people on long-term sickness benefits. And that means that we're losing the productive capacity of those people in the economy. And indeed, we're paying benefits. So what people who should be contributing are not contributing and are drawing benefits as a consequence.
When you were Health Secretary, all manner of papers and research come across your desk, of course, and it's a labyrinthine world of separating the wheat from the chaff. Was it ever flagged then? I mean, the mental health issue, which of course has always been with us. And, you know, thank goodness we can talk about this stuff now in a way that perhaps really was written off years ago for all sorts of reasons. But was there ever a sense then, when you were in the cabinet, that this was a problem and it was likely to grow?
I tell you what, I don't remember a day when people didn't say, we're going to talk about this and we've got the courage to talk about it, which previous generations didn't. Yes. I think that that's been absolutely constant. And although I welcome the fact there is a conversation, I think it's based on what is frankly a lie if it's based on the proposition that it's never been discussed before. I sat round the cabinet table as Health Secretary when Peter Lilly was what was then Social Security Secretary. Yep. And we spent a long time dealing with exactly these issues, defining the terms on which people had benefits, the terms on which people had access to services, in order to ensure that we provided support that responded to the real needs of people at the time. What's happened, I think, in recent years is that conversation hasn't been as followed through in as methodical and detailed way that needs to be done. My recollection of the conversations within the cabinet is that they were long, they were detailed, they were based on evidence. We have to move off, if I may put it this way, tabloid journalism saying that these are all layabouts, and understand why these statistics are going against us and what we need to do about it.
And if we got, I was about to say 3 million, almost 3 million people out of the workforce due to long-term health problems. That won't always be mental illness. We've got people who've got other issues going on, heart disease, 20%. I mean, the list is extensive and it's varied, but nonetheless, I mean, this is a huge figure and it appears to be growing.
It not merely appears to be. It's gone up by about 40% in 5 years at a time when elsewhere in Europe it's not gone up at all. Now,
so that can't just be COVID then, can it?
No, it definitely. They had COVID on the continent as well.
Yeah, well, indeed, that's my point. I mean, we often talk about, well, since COVID, which has sort of become this buzz analogy to make or comparison to make. And of course, that's not true, as you rightly say. Other countries aren't experiencing the same thing.
No, I mean, these are very, very compelling statistical comparisons. If you look at what's happened in this country and you look at what's happened in other comparable countries elsewhere in Europe, they have not seen the growth of this problem. We have seen a 40% growth of this problem. So that requires detailed analysis. And the question, if I may say so, to the councillor who was on before is fine. I completely agree with him about the problem. What we now need is some detailed proposals to deal with it, and maybe we should learn from other people elsewhere in Europe who've clearly been better at dealing with it than we have.
Is it just in the British psyche, do you think? You know, is it up there with sort of fish and chips and a cup of tea that we also have a disproportionate propensity to take time off sick? Is that going to be part of our new DNA going forward?
I'm not a big believer in national psyche, to be honest. I think human beings are broadly comparable wherever in the world you meet them. What is true is that different countries have different ways of dealing with it, and other countries are more successful at dealing with it than we are.
And it's interesting, you mentioned social security. We were looking up the figures for Germany, where health benefits are far more, I don't know if the right word is generous, but there's certainly, you get more money, physically get more money. It's about 120 euros a day, about 110 quid. So it's not just that then, is it? Because, you know, if you followed the logic of some, that this is about benefits being too generous, then we'd have a far bigger problem in Germany than we do in the UK, but we don't.
Well, and exactly the opposite is true, in fact. So one of the, my strong view is that we need to do the hard work to look at what does work and what doesn't. Yeah. And it won't be a single, there will be no magic bullet, silver bullet solution to this. There will be a whole series of detailed policies that need to change to address what is a very significant problem. One of the things that I'm sure is part of that policy mix is the need to have more effective local services to support people who are at the margin. The people who are hard work go-getters, they're not the problem. And there are people, of course, who are long-term sick, who need to be supported. It's the people at the borderline that are the problem. Yeah. And what we need to have is proper services that support those people to get them the right side of the borderline.
But many would say, well, we've got those services. You know, firstly, it's called common sense. You know, everybody knows that there's nothing, you know, if it is somebody, you're absolutely right. I feel quite proud to live in a country where we have a good system and a civilised system to look after people. I don't ever want to see that go. But there's clearly something in the Venn diagram here that's a little uncomfortable for everybody. In a word or in a sentence, Stephen, what's your own analysis of what has happened with that particular group?
Well, one of the key elements, and I absolutely don't say this is the whole story, but one of the key elements is that local services supporting people who are at the margin are not as effective as they used to be. They are less well resourced, putting it simply. They're also, I think, less well managed and less well integrated into the rest of public services. It's about having proper public services within each community, and actually local councillors can play a significant part in that. So one of the questions to reform councillors who wish to address this question is, what are they going to do about it? If they sit on a council, they can help.
There it is, Stephen. Thank you. Stephen Dorrell, he's former Health Secretary, former Conservative, now a Liberal Democrat. So it's that group in the middle. I think we all agree with that bit. Do those people need services, as Mr. Dorrell just suggested? It's the services that aren't up to scratch. Is this just a case of... And it's certainly, and I think he was right there, it's not just a post-COVID thing, because otherwise you'd have the same problem kind of everywhere. I mean, there are other places that might have similar problems, but it seems similar-sized economies, France, Germany, Spain, those kind of areas, there's not really any comparison. So we've got this whole cohort of characters that are on the long-term sick. Nearly 2.9 million people aged 16 to 64 are out of work due to long-term health problems. We've got a 69% of those health claims involve mental health problems. You can't dispute a mental health problem. You can't, you know, if you ring up your boss and say, I can't come into work, my mental health is going off like Billy-O. And if you have a mental health problem, that absolutely, you shouldn't be in work if that's the correct option for you. But what do you do with somebody who's feeling, not just feeling a little bit anxious or having a bit of a stressful day, but that group of people who genuinely believe that having a bit of a stressful day counts as a reasonable excuse not to go to work? 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. How do we define it? Why is the UK too sick to work? Our lines are open. This is Talk.
The other day, an activity session being run by the Royal Museums in Greenwich. They're running drag aerobic sessions for children of all ages. And having looked at the advertising material, it looks like softcore pornography. Another example, King's College London, meant to be one of the best educational institutes of the country, has just appointed a quote-unquote asexual activist as a research fellow.
Great.
Whatever the hell that means.
I mean, why are they bothering?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Andy says we need to always qualify the difference between long-term sick and disabled. Genuinely disabled people are getting roped in with long COVIDs and stressed people. That's a good point. One here from Bog288 who says, ex-school friend of mine, never worked in 20 years, has mental health, anxiety, insomnia, drug addiction, along with endless claims of bad back, stomach, aching limbs. None of this stops him going to the pub, cinema, restaurant or holiday. For that matter, he just can't work. That's the group, isn't it? That is the group. How do you ever prove that? We all, you know, like I always say this, you know, people say, well, you can't take anecdotal evidence. And when I've found myself arguing these kind of cases with people who live in a sort of, you know, often left-wing, but certainly middle-class bubble, countless radio and TV shows I've been on, this has come up. You know, where I lived on which wasn't a particularly rough council estate, but it was a council estate and there were some rough elements to it. From where my mum and dad lived, I can still remember the houses and I can still remember the families. Some of them I went to school with. I can think of, off the top of my head, 5, 6 families that lived within a 60-second walk of our house, where no one in that house ever went to work. It's just the way it was. They just never went to work. Now, I think that's quite a lot in one locality. I think that's quite a big number, right? Now, if you put that across the country, now back then, back in the kind of 70s or 80s, people just got their gyro and that's what they did. They have different names for these things now, but you can bet your life. Today, those people would be on the very list we're talking about here of the long-term sick. Christine is in Lincolnshire. How are you doing, Christine?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure. What are your thoughts?
I've worked in the social care system for 30 years, so I think I've got a reasonable oversight of what goes on.
Okay.
But when I think when I came into the workplace, it was in the 70s, and you could always get a job. Don't matter what you did, pushed a broom from non-intellectual right up to intellectual.
Yeah.
Newspapers full of jobs. Your expectation was that you would leave school, go on to college, or go into work, and you would work. You would build your way up through houses, etc. But the jobs aren't there. So what we're seeing now, I think, is second and third generation families, people, perhaps miners and colliers and steel industry and all these things that are no longer there. So you get onto benefits, basically, and the basic universal credit in the SA is not high. The way to get higher benefits is then to become sick. And once you're on the sick, you get more money. You get more money, but also what you can do is after a certain period of time, like the old incapacity benefit, you don't have to produce fit notes anymore, and you get more money again.
True.
That's another £70 a week. And then you can look at claiming PIP. Now, PIP isn't easy to get, and PIP is the right benefit to get if you're disabled, but I think it leads on to a lot of people who aren't disabled, and I know it is because the sector are still working. It's just a way of getting more money, and you can get up to £750 a month extra if you get the full rate of PIP. So why wouldn't people want to do that?
And that's the problem, isn't it? You know, we played that clip earlier from a Channel 4 show. I don't know if you heard it, Christine, but, you know, was a guy saying, yes, exactly that. I could go to work, but I get the same amount of money by working part-time. So why would he go to work?
Universal, if you're getting universal credit, you're probably getting £200 and odd pounds every other week, so you're getting £400 a month. You'll be getting your housing benefit and other bits and bobs as well.
Yeah.
But you get long-term sick, you get to the point where you don't have to claim for a sick note, well, what they call fit notes now, not sick notes. So they're accepting that you'll never work, basically. You're in for another £70 a week.
Yeah.
You then get PIP, and you can get PIP is paid at 2 levels. But if you need it for your personal care and you need it for your mobility, bang, another £750.
There it is, Christine.
So
on
you're
that,
very quickly up to £1,500 a month plus housing benefit.
Wow. I mean, there's money in them there hills if you can play the system in that way, and that doesn't take anything away from the people that genuinely need that support. Christine, thank you very much indeed. Why is the UK too sick to work? More of that, more comment from you on the way as well. 0344 499 1000. Right now, it's 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
About 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. Yeah, welcome back to the show, the home of common sense. We've got a lot to get through here this afternoon. We are talking, of course, is it a welfare trap? Is it a sick note trap? Why is the UK too sick to work? Ministers are urging reforms to tackle the rise in the problem. Mental health benefits are through the roof. Liz Kendall warning against writing people off. And a councillor facing a backlash over controversial remarks because he likened mental health illnesses to the new bad back problem. We spoke to him a little earlier in the programme. Also this afternoon, can you believe this? A pro-Palestinian march in London faced criticism for its timing and anti-Semitic slogans, with Rishi Sunak condemning hate speech and activists defending their call for justice in Gaza. It's an extraordinary story. More on that too. And as you've been hearing, the Science Museum guide controversially claims Lego reinforces heteronormative ideas. But the brand continues to champion its gender-neutral ethos, stating that everyone can enjoy its creativity. Nobody ever argued against that. Nobody ever said, oh, it's Lego. That's a bit homophobic, isn't it, the old Lego? Every time I play it, I turn into a right old bigot with me bricks and my Star Wars set and my Harry Potter ones and all the other bits and pieces that you can. My house is littered with Lego. Never once has it crossed my mind, as I've assisted my kids building all sorts of towers and Black Panther, which took 3 months to build, and God knows, never once did we think, if we get caught with this, it's like contraband. They'll be coming round, it'll be like some kind of hate museum that we've got going on in the kids' bedrooms. Never once. We'll look at that in more detail as well. This one from Alan in Notts, who says, reference Sick Note UK, I think most people are sick of previous and the current lying, incompetent governments and the state of this country. It's enough to make anyone depressed and anxious, to be fair. I mean, I do think there are some genuine issues as to why people might be a little genuinely on a downer. The idea that, for example, the obvious thing of trying to buy a house, and I know it's a subject I come back to all the time whenever we talk about this. You know, my sister worked as an office junior, and her boyfriend was a forklift driver, and they met, they got engaged, they got married, and they bought a house. And there was nothing, you know, quite proud of the fact my sister bought a house. I remember being the younger brother going, wow, my sister owns a house, this is amazing. The actual buying of the house was not particularly controversial. She was about 22, I think, he was 24. Nothing weird about that. Could an office junior and a forklift driver seriously buy a house? Probably not. And I think that things like that, the expense of living in the UK it's pretty tough out there. But we have 3 million people on long-term health sickness, and that's a huge number, and it's growing. As Stephen Dorrell said to us earlier, it's not comparable to other countries who don't have the same problem. We're taking your calls on that. Why is the UK too sick to work? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. Callum Price, former Special Advisor and Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Callum, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good as gold at this end. Nice to have you with us. I mean, this is the Gordian knot, is it not, of all areas of government? You know, that one area that you don't want to work in, the Department of Work and Pensions, because this dilemma, this problem, this cluster of confusing stories which spill into other departments as well. It's never ending, right? I mean, but this narrative has always been there in one form or another. It just seems to have taken a rather dramatic turn in the last 5 years.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, post-COVID, the problem of people who are economically inactive and who are on long-term sickness and disability benefit is skyrocketing. And as you've mentioned, it's looking like that problem's not going to stop anytime soon, with the numbers projected to rise even further. And it's a problem across the board. It's a problem for the economy. It's a problem for the NHS. It's a problem for everybody. And then it impacts also issues of migration and everything else. So you're absolutely right. There's a Gordian knot that sort of messes with the entire government, and it's a problem that's clearly not too easy to fix. I think one thing that is perhaps changing, I hope it's changing, is that there's definitely an element of people sort of taking the mickey, as this candidate said today. There's always going to be an element of that. But I think, and I know you were discussing this earlier on your programme, I think that's the real problem is actually in the incentive structure that the state has built. If the state allows a situation in which people can say, actually, I know I do have anxiety, and actually if I say that, then I can get as much, sometimes even more than I would be getting paid on a full-time job, then they're just following the incentives that are put in front of them. And one wouldn't necessarily argue with that. It would take somebody of astounding moral integrity to say, no, I'm not going to enter the welfare system, and actually I'll go to work and get less money. I mean, people can make those choices, but they probably don't because people follow incentives. So there's clearly a system failure here. And it sounds like Liz Kendall is maybe looking to fix that, but it's politically, it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is, because I don't know if anybody really knows the answer. Because if you wanted to be, if you were living in North Korea, they would say, well, you just don't pay anybody any benefits. And, if they struggle to heat or eat, that's their fault. That might well be your approach. And we don't, thankfully, do that kind of stuff here. However, that nobody seems to have any other answer. I remember years ago somebody saying the only thing worse than a chancellor with what they used to call a gyro check in their hand was a chancellor without a gyro check in their hand for society. That would have been a bigger problem, a bigger headache for governments. So it's a curious dilemma, and I don't know if there's ever going to be an answer to it.
You're absolutely right. It's extremely difficult, and I'm not sure anyone does have the answers yet, although the government are looking at it. Multiple governments have looked at it in the past and tried to do things about it, but it not often amounts to tinkering around the edges, as government action always seems to do. But like I said, there needs to be sort of system change and a culture change. Something has clearly shifted post-COVID, where people have... Where people have been more accepting, quite rightly, of the impact of mental health. That's extremely important, but maybe that has gone too far the other way. If we're having a Labour Secretary of State talking that way, then I think that's probably quite a good litmus test. So it's about trying to find a balance between real long-term sickness and actually trying to help people into work. Because at the end of the day, it's about trying to get people back on the ladder into employment, and we know all the good benefits that can have, not just economically, but to people's mental health as well. And people are coming out, and so on your programme earlier today, people are coming out and who are meeting with these incentives and pointing it out and saying, look, even I know this is ridiculous. I'd quite like to get into work, but it's going to cost me however many grand a month or year to get a job, so why would I?
Why
so
would
it's
you
clearly
do
a problem.
Yeah. Here's a question. Is the UK going back to the 1970s? I'm sure you don't remember the 1970s, Callum. Even I was in short trousers in the 1970s. But, it is always the kind of go-to phrase, isn't it? It's like we've gone back to the 70s, the pre-Thatcher, the Labour government of the time. Anyone who knows just at the surface bits of history will know it was a very grim time. Labour governments were in chaos. They couldn't make anything work. The place was falling apart. The lights went out. The unions were bold and strong, and everything was chaotic. And now there's a suggestion, certainly an accusation, that Labour is taking the United Kingdom back to a bit of that rising inflation, flattening growth, stagflation as it's called, the Bank of England warning. And of course the interview with the governor of the Bank of England didn't shun away from saying, some of this is due to the budget.
Yeah, exactly. The parallels between now and the 1970s are eerily similar and eerily frequent. I mean, it's not exactly the same for a multitude of reasons, but there are very similar symptoms we're feeling at the moment. As you say, the growth forecast the Bank of England have cut in half to 0.75% this year, which is depressingly low on any measure. And inflation's rising, and unemployment's rising. So it is certainly starting to feel a little bit like that. And absolutely, I mean, there are multiple effects. There are multiple things that affect this. The global trade war that Trump's kicking off isn't any good for it, the price of energy. But absolutely right that the budget that the Chancellor put forward in October isn't helping at all. What she's doing is, and this goes back to what we were saying about welfare, she's making it a hell of a lot harder to hire people, more expensive to hire them, more difficult to fire them. And what businesses have seen from that or done from that is say, whoa, okay, in that case, we're feeling a lot less confident about this, about our prospects this year. We're not going to be able to grow as much as we wanted to, or even if at all, we may have to fire people because you're adding to the wage bill through national insurance. You're adding to the wage bill through the increase in minimum wage and the levelling of minimum wage for 18-year-olds up to 21-year-olds. And that you're giving people sort of full employment rights from day one and getting rid of 0 hours contracts and making it harder to have probation periods. Yeah. So suddenly the growth in the business, and we know that the private sector, it's businesses that drive growth in the economy. It's not through government spending, and the government is doing all the wrong things on that front. On the other hand, the government deserves a lot of credit, because one of the things that has held this country back for decades is the inability to build anything. Yeah. We haven't built a reservoir since the 90s. There are all these examples. The Bat Tunnel at HS2. It is impossible to build anything in this country, not just housing, which is making housing more expensive and home ownership, frankly, unaffordable for millions, but infrastructure as well. That's trains, that's energy, that's everything else. So, but the government is making all the right noises and quite quite good actions on that front to make it easier to build, to get the economy growing again. And just this week, we've seen something positive from Ed Miliband on boosting nuclear energy, which is super important and a really good step. But will these things have an impact in the time frame that the Chancellor needs them to be? That remains to be seen. So the first thing that you always think when you're in government and you want to do something, first do no harm. And what they're doing with the budget and with the employment rights bill, that's harm. And I think they should rethink that. Whether they will with their union paymasters is a slightly different question.
Yeah, it's interesting that line of do no harm, and yet they came in with literally zero honeymoon period, and it was sort of almost quite grim from day one. And, you know, we had the farmers issue, we've got the winter fuel allowance debacle, all of these things. I mean, you know, these guys not only know how to muck it up, but to do so with harm.
Exactly. I mean, they sort of came in, and I think they sort of took the approach, well, we're not the Tories, so everything will be okay. And on some cases that is right, but on some it certainly hasn't been enough. And they've made some slip-ups, some political mishaps, as well as just economically idiotic, you might say, maybe a bit harsh, but idiotically difficult decisions, certainly. So they absolutely are doing harm, and they need to have a rethink. But like I say, it's sort of a Jekyll and Hyde government when it comes to economic growth.
Sure.
On one hand, they're doing stuff that so many other governments have shied away from, so they deserve a lot of plaudits for that, for really taking on the NIMBYs and the blockers and getting Britain building again. But then on the other hand, where the trade unions are involved, things are a little bit the other way.
Indeed. And interestingly, the Conservatives are getting to grips, apparently, finally, with migration. They are talking, Kemi Badenoch proposing that migrants have got to work in Britain for 10 years, avoiding benefits and social housing to qualify for citizen status, as it were. Big old list there. I mean, you worked for the last government. I think you worked in the Home Office as well, Callum, I think I'm right in saying. I mean, migration and all of that, never a dull day. How often did that come up in a meeting? I bet every hour, didn't it?
Yeah, every sort of 5 to 10 minutes, I would say. It was basically the number one issue. Yeah, so I worked under James Cleverly, and the reforms that he put in place have made a cut to migration. He increased the thresholds for bringing dependents and other reforms that have brought migration down, but that's by no means the end of the equation. Yeah. And over the 14 years that Tories were in power, they didn't do enough on migration, and they talked a great game, but didn't really do anything at all.
Why was that, do you think? I mean, what was behind that? Was it because there is that kind of sort of left meets right in a curious way. There's the sort of Corbyn, we don't want any borders and, everybody's welcome. There's that. And then there's the kind of almost David Cameron, Boris Johnson style liberal approach that, we need migrant workers. Don't worry, don't panic. There's never going to be more migrants than there are indigenous people. But it's just the way the world is. There's that kind of relaxed approach. And I sense the Conservatives for a lot of that 14 years were in that category. And I've never been sure what the persuasive arguments are for that. It sort of misses social cohesion as a factor, which I think is huge. But nonetheless, it's the Conservative Party. You might think they would get a grip of it. And now, of course, Reform have come along and they've hoovered up all of the headlines on this one. It's going to be very hard for Kemi Badenoch to lead the way on the immigration debate when she's facing people like Nigel Farage.
Well, that's absolutely right. But I actually think that the announcement that Kemi and the Tories have made this week on their plans for immigration are a really good step in the right direction on that political issue, as well as on the actual policy matter. Because what they've done is, up until now, they've taken this sort of the slow, probably quite sensible approach to say, look, we're not going to get into policy. We're going to have a review of what we stand for, and then we're going to come to the policy later, which is probably right. But in immigration, they need to move a bit quicker, and they've noticed that, and they've done that. And before the announcement this week, their one policy on migration was to put a sort of a legal cap on it, which is all well and good, but it's how do you actually enforce that? It seems a little bit tokenistic. And not entirely in keeping with the sort of new radical approach that we want, because we've put a cap on it before. The Tories have put a cap on it before under David Cameron that then just wasn't met. Yeah. But what this is, the proposals that they brought forward on indefinite leave to remain are well thought through. They're very detailed. They're things that haven't been tried before or really even discussed that much until recent months. And they're really sort of putting, look, this is our new approach to it. And it's quite a serious and intellectually consistent and rigorous approach. that will actually perhaps wrong foot reform a little bit. They will have to now come out with their own serious proposals. Up until now, reform, and Nigel Farage is probably the most, if not one of the most, influential politicians in British politics who have never held office. So he's a sort of a permanent opposition politician, and he's done an amazing job doing that. But what he's never done is wrestled with the levers of power. But the Conservatives have. The Conservatives like to call themselves the sort of party of government, and that has lots of downsides, and their record in the last 14 years that they're trying to get away from is one of those downsides. But it means that they know how to put together a policy platform. They know the real problems and how to fix them, or at least they should. And this policy platform that Kemi and the Conservatives have put forward this week is quite a serious and comprehensive and well thought through and relatively radical approach that can answer a lot of questions, and really also sticks to sort of the Conservative flag on the ground, say, look, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do on migration reform. What are you going to do other than just talking about net migration? And the ball is in Reform's court, but they have the time, they have the support, they have the poll leads to sort of hit one back. So we'll see what they do.
We will. Listen, Callum, it's been great to have you on. We will speak again. Thank you, Callum Price, former special advisor over there at the Home Office. He was alongside the Justice Department, many other departments as well. Knows his way around. Thoughts on what he said as well. 0344 499 1000. That is where you'll find us. Loads to get through here this afternoon. More calls from you on the way next. It's nearly 2:20.
She is proposing a number of things. One, if you're jobless, you're low paid, you've been claiming benefits, then no, you can't settle indefinitely in the UK, and therefore you wouldn't be allowed to then claim citizenship. She's also saying if you've entered the country legally, you're only allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain once you've been in the country for 10 years, not the current 5 years, and after that you have to wait another 5 years before you are allowed to attempt to apply for citizenship. I mean, I think most people would just be stunned to learn that you can be here for just 5 years.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. 22 minutes after 2 o'clock. Neil says, if Lego is anti-trans, then so is plumbing. We tend to use male and female fittings. I can't see male to male working. Oh. Well, it might. Nobody ever referred to Lego, though, did they, in male and female parts? I mean, that's never... I don't know where the Science Museum got this old claptrap from. It's extraordinary. Andrew's in Birmingham, reference long-term sick. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm fine, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, what's going on?
Good, right. I thought I'd ring up. I've probably got 3 examples of this long-term sick nonsense, what I call it. You know, I understand. I used to manage quite a large sales force a few years ago, and I understand that some people can be on long-term sick, and obviously as a sales manager, I would try and manage that the best I possibly can. However, moving away from that employment side, I mean, I know. My sister is. I'm going to talk about 2 different contracts now. Okay. Contrasts, sorry. So my sister is disabled. Mm-hmm. She's riddled with lots of illnesses and realistically needs probably 20, 25 tablets a day to function. And because of need, because she needs to work, she can't cope with the benefits that she gets because she's got 2 children and she lives on her own. So she has to go to work. So her need is to work. And hats off to her. She works really hard. She earns more money than she would on benefits because her need is there, you know. Yeah. And this is what I'm trying to get to, whereas I know 2 people that since... One's about 35, one's about 25. And since I've left school, they left school with not very many qualifications, but since I left school, they've never worked. And they get benefit.
How is that? Do you ever scratch your head on that, Andrew, and go, how is that even possible? Imagine going up, imagine getting to 35 saying, I've never gone to work.
Yeah, and I think I'll comment on that shortly, but I think the bit about need, you know, they're happy not working. They're happy living on the money that they get. Mm. The older one, who's 34, looks after his disabled mother and gets, I think it's a carer's allowance, or which is
that would sound about right.
Yeah, and so with that money, which he doesn't give his mother, and the benefit you get, he's happy to stay at home, play his PlayStation, and talk to people all around the world about whatever he talks about. But again, and his younger sister's the same. Now, they're happy with the money that they get from the state, and they don't have a need to want for more money, and I think that is something that I think in this country is difficult to combat because obviously somebody like, in answer to your statement earlier, I run my own business, and I want to earn a set amount of money and I have aspirations and all the rest of it, but so I couldn't think about sitting at home and living on benefits.
No,
because my need is my need wouldn't be fed with that pittance.
No, because your mind has got other ideas. But you can kind of see, Andrew, can't you, why? Yeah, because most people on benefits, truth be told, they're not earning tens of thousands a year. But if it's paying your bills and it gives you, after you've paid your bills, bought your food, you've still got 60 quid in your pocket at the end of every week. You can go and have the odd pint. You can go out once in a while. Some people are all right with that.
Oh, absolutely, and the older person I'm talking about, who's like mid-30s, he blames autism, saying that he doesn't like crowds, he doesn't like loud noises, and all the rest of it. Now, again, I don't know that much about autism, but what I do know is there's lots of people, I'm sure, in this country work with autism. And then what happens is he meets somebody online. About a year and a half ago, he met somebody who lived in Germany, really liked them, paid for his flight himself out of his benefits, went over there for 6 months and got a job.
Wow.
Because there is no other way where he
so his circumstances changed, so he had to adapt.
Yes, and that's what I think. I think, I see a lot of people, I feel, that because of their circumstances, it's very easy to get money. And through handouts and through benefits, and certain people are happy to live on that. Whatever reason.
And for some people that works just fine. And I don't know what you're meant to do with that group of people. I mean, if somebody's, you know, I said at the beginning, shouldn't have to say this, I don't think any of us have a different view to them. We want to support people who are sick. That's a civilised world. You know, want to help people. So this debate isn't about people who are genuinely sick. It's about that 100%. Other group that, you know, you can't. There might be something slightly wrong, but you know, what do you do with that group? Do you give them no money at all? Then you've got a bigger problem on your hand.
100%. I mean, I haven't got the answer to it. But
I don't think anybody does.
No, but there are lots of people in this country that are taking benefits who say that they can't work for whatever reason, and it's just not true.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the answer is. Do you?
No, I wish I did. I mean, we just spoke to Stephen Dorrell. He was a former health secretary for years, and he doesn't know the answer either. You know, people who've literally been doing the job in that world, I don't think anybody does, and it's a kind of weird conundrum that keeps getting sort of kicked in the long grass, and they come up with an initiative and they say controversial things. Nothing really happens. Listen, Andrew, it's a great call. Thank you for that. Really thorough stuff from Andrew in Birmingham. Pradeep is in Loughborough. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm not too bad, Ian. How are you, right?
I'm good as gold, thank you. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you for having me on anyway.
Pleasure.
Well, my thoughts are, I've been through an illness and I'm still working, but I take a slightly different view, actually, because I've been ill, I've gone through a serious illness and I'm still working. But I take my view is the mentality has slightly changed, I think, because years ago, back in, because I'm probably about the same age as you, Ian, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, you want a good salary, you could buy a house, you could buy a car, you could have a family, and it'd be all well and good. But now, basically, you're just working to make ends meet. I mean, all the utilities gone up, food's gone up, food prices have gone up, look at the gas bill, electricity bills going up. The average salary, you're talking about between 28 and 30,000, which in the term, which is not really a hell of a lot of money. And then the flip side, my other point would be, you think about the UK taxpayer and all these illegal immigrants that are coming in and staying in the hotels. Where's the billions of pounds going? They're going into hotels.
Yeah.
They're going into foreign aid.
What was it? 4 or 5 million or 6 or 7 million a day? On the hotel bill.
Exactly, yeah. So it makes you wonder. I mean, I'm going to work. I'm paying my taxes.
Yeah.
And where's my taxes going? I mean, I live in Loughborough. You walk down the road. I mean, nothing. I mean, you don't get the bin collectors picking up the rubbish. I complain to my local authority loads of times. They've not done anything. You see rubbish on the floor. You don't see the street cleaners coming anymore to sweep the streets anymore. So what are
100%, you know. Well, cycle lanes, I'm sure.
Exactly, yeah.
They love a cycle. I'm sure it's the same in Leicestershire. That, you know, certainly in Kent, I mean, they can't help but wake up in the morning with a desire to build a cycle lane.
They just the one thing with the government is that they just took him in. Look, what about the Rwanda scheme? They spend billions, right?
Yeah.
And yet they talk about taking people off benefit. I mean, like I said, I'm working, so mine's a completely different story. But I literally sympathise with those people who are on benefit. Obviously, you've got the genuine cases.
Correct.
And then, I mean, I know of a chap who I sort of like regularly chat with. He's only like 26, 27. He's never done a day's work in his life.
Unreal.
And to me,
I find that's just so shocking to hear it, isn't it? You think, how could you never have got... You know, imagine when you turn up to work, especially for a new job, it's a bit weird, isn't it? Day one, you don't know anybody. But you take a couple of weeks and you're kind of part of it, and then it grows from... The idea that you've never done that, I find that extraordinary. Listen, Pradeep, we've got to move there because we've hit the clock. You've been great, thank you. Good call from Loughborough on long-term sickness. What is the answer? Nobody knows the answer to this one. We can keep looking at wastage. and we can say, well, that's clearly obscene, that we're spending money there, we're spending money there. I mean, so if you think of cycle lanes at the moment, if you think of migrant hotels at the moment, I always have to put this caveat in as well. It doesn't matter whether you're left wing or right wing. No one can say that £6-7 million a day on migrant hotels is sustainable. I mean, it's unbelievable. A day? £49 million a week on hotels of people that came here by rowing on a boat to Dover. Get in the bin, mate. I mean, seriously? That's just one aspect. Then you can look at all the other areas of kind of amazing waste. And we were talking yesterday about government waste and the cycle lane addiction of local authorities, while potholes go unfilled, while services are closed, while things are shutting down. And they've got the money to build even if you're pro-cycle lanes, even if you go, do you know what, in an ideal world, I'd like more cycle lanes. Yeah, fantastic. In an ideal world, there's lots of things I would like. The cycle, you'd have to go when it came to the budget at the local council, where we've got this big old fat list of stuff we need to do. I'm sorry, but your cycle lane, it's just going to go on the back burner for a bit, and then when we've got loads of money, then we'll build the cycle lanes and everyone can get their two wheels and their unicycles out and they can cycle to their heart's content. I mean, that cannot ever in anyone's world be priority number one. 0344 499 1000. More from you on the way. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. What about this for a story? I had to kind of read this twice when I first saw it. Pro-Palestinian activists from the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign have faced backlash for organising a London march on October the 7th. And this coincided, of course, with Hamas's deadly attack in Israel. We know the details. Critics called the timing insensitive. It was more than that, while the organisers defended the protest, highlighting Gaza's plight. The October 14th march drew 30,000 attendees, but was overshadowed by anti-Semitic chants. You may remember Rishi Sunak condemning this. Just extraordinary. Apparently they were on the phone saying, yeah, this is still going ahead. It's like, are you not reading the room, mate? You've not turned the TV on, seen the news. Richard Ferrer is the editor of the Jewish News. Richard, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
As it turned out, I didn't really need to read it twice because I was correct in what I read the first time. I mean, I was staggered to think that anybody set against what had happened would be planning, frankly, any kind of campaign.
Yes, indeed. The cold, hard facts as you have iterated, are these: the Palestine solidarity campaign's reflex response to the mass slaughter of Jews on the 7th of October 2023 in real time, as they were taking place, was to organise a protest against the victims. And that's not solidarity, is it? That's fanaticism.
Is that how fanaticism works, then? That you kind of don't even recognise the brutality or the horror of... And I don't want to use the word enemies lightly, but I've always thought the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign and that kind of thinking is really just an anti-Israel, anti-Jewish sentiment, really. If you look at what some of those protests were all about, it was there for anybody to see what, as far as I was concerned, what was really going on. Do these people just not see it? Do they not care? Are they, not wise enough to realise that, if they had any credibility in their cause, and there's nothing wrong with different causes, then this does very little to win people over?
Yeah, the facade has crumbled. Since that terrible day 16 months ago, the moderate middle, those who are genuinely concerned about the care of the Israelis and the future of the Palestinians, they have been, I felt they've been relentlessly crushed on both sides. And who's doing the crushing? It's the bad faith players, the organisations that are masquerading as earnest human rights groups, who are in reality, as we can see now with the PSC, ideologically driven movements. The centre ground has never been so precarious, and the honest brokers who will create hopefully a better future for both people are getting shouted out here.
And I understand these marches, I think they want to continue them. I don't know how... It's interesting, we were just talking yesterday, a slightly different point on this, Richard, but it's relevant that, the amount that the policing costs to put a march or a protest on. You might think somebody would go, well, yeah, you can have a march maybe, once a year or, but once a week, for goodness sake. I mean, these things were happening with such alarming regularity, and we know that the cost was tens of millions of pounds to the Met Police to do this.
I think it's raked up about 55 million to the taxpayer.
Right. Yeah.
It's extraordinary. I mean, it's interesting that you bring up these marches. The PSC is embedded in the UK's trade unions, the National Education Union, the RMT, Communication Union. I think it's probably about time now, in the wake of this shocking story, that people who pay their subs to these unions start asking themselves, what does the PSC really stand for? What do their actions and their motivations really point to? Is there a genuine commitment here to human rights? And it's my hope. There's a day of action. They've got another day of action, I think, on the 15th, Saturday week. Yeah. It is my hope, Ian, that decent-minded people who have been misled and boosted their numbers at these Saturday rallies will now finally see exactly who they're standing alongside all this time. And I genuinely urge people in the moderate middle, stay away from these rallies.
But I do want, I find it extraordinary, though, Richard, that anybody would, if you look at what happened in Israel on that terrible day, and as people were still laying dead in their homes and families were trying to identify, who'd gone and not being able to get in touch, and emergency, the absolute horror and the chaos of that. And you've got people organising a protest at this time. I can only think that they're thinking, it's so ingrained. It's the idea that, because somebody is so firmly your enemy, then it actually doesn't matter to them. And I didn't want to say that, really. I don't think these people care about what happened in Israel.
No, they don't. No, they don't. I've spoken to people on that side of the debate, and I've asked the really telling question: if you had heads up on the 6th of October what was going to happen the next day, would you have raised the alarm?
Yeah.
You can imagine some of the answers. They don't realise they're drowning in their own filth at this point. The wolf has shed its sheep's clothing. It's interesting. The PSC had its AGM last weekend, and Ben Jamal, the head of this organisation, stood up and made the main speech, and he made clear that one of the organisation's aims, get this, is to oppose, and I'm quoting this, the regime of Jewish supremacy. It's on YouTube. It's around 5 minutes in. You just Google it. you'll see he actually says regime of Jewish supremacy. They put that damn video up themselves.
What do they mean? I mean, the regime of Jewish supremacy. I mean, is that what is that Israel? Is that what they're saying? That's the country, the thing, or are they suggesting it's, you know, Jewish supremacy? Is it the old kind of the Jews run the world thing again? I mean, what on earth is meant by that?
Well, you'd have to ask them that, but you won't get a straight answer, I'm afraid.
I fear we won't. Richard, thank you for coming on with us. Richard Ferret is the editor of Jewish News with us on the programme. Absolutely extraordinary that the campaign was organising their protest on that day. That would have been the point when you'd gone, no, we can't do this. Nothing will stop those people. You know, people see enemies, and once they satisfy themselves, this happens in conventional politics as well. You know, you see it a lot with the Great Divide and the sort of polarised world we're currently living in. And once you've decided somebody is not just your opposition, because that's how it used to be. I sound a bit of romance here, but it used to be, you know, I'm Tory and therefore I oppose Labour, Lib Dem and therefore I oppose Labour and the Tory, blah, blah, blah. But opposition has become sort of enemy territory. And once you've decided somebody is your enemy, then having a pop at them, libelling them, saying the most horrendous things about them, or organising a protest against them, it's like, to these guys, it's like organising a protest against Saddam Hussein or Chairman Mao, you know? Idi Amin. It's up there with that. That's how ingrained the enemy status is. That's how much they hate the person or the thinking or the ideology or whatever, whoever it is. They hate it that much that anything goes. It's like, really? I'm not punching down, I'm punching up here. I'm punching up at these terrible, terrible people. Few of them died, who cares? I don't care. These people are the devil. That's the thinking. So that's what you're trying to penetrate. That explains why people would phone around and go, don't forget to come to the protest today. What, the protest when there's hundreds of people in their homes dead after a mass slaughter? Seriously? 0344 499 1000. Great message from Phil, which I'll come to in a second. This is Dean in Bridgend on sickness benefits. How you doing, Dean?
How's it going? Are you all right?
Very good, thanks. Yeah, fire away.
Yeah, so I earn £3,600 a month. I work driving HGV lorries with cranes on them. Mm-hmm. Basically, after I paid all my bills, I'm left with £1,400.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, why should I slug myself to death, driving to work, spending all my money, blah, 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 when I can just go on benefits, claim housing benefit, get a fat paid for me, say I got mental health problems when I haven't, because it's so easy to get these days, and just live off benefit like everybody else instead of me paying for everybody else. Someone else can pay for me for a change.
Even if you didn't get as much, you'd still have to, you'd factor in, well, I didn't have to go to work either. So you'd still be, even if you got half of that, you would still be better off in the sense that you're not having to slog and get up in the morning and do a day's work.
Yeah, Ian, I could just literally go to the gym most of the day.
That's true.
And go and see my family.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I've been working since 16. Do you know what I mean? And I look at my other people in my family and think, you guys so easy. I'm basically paying your benefits.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, if this government's going to be so easy on benefits, I might as well go on it as well. And there's going to be another person out of the workforce.
Yeah. Well, let's hope you don't, Dean. I'm glad you do work. Thank you for calling. Dean in Bridgend on benefits. It depends what benefit. A few people have got in touch, and I'm going to read out Phil's message here. It isn't, you don't just get all of these benefits, all right? I said at the beginning, the very beginning of the show, I put the caveat in there that this is not about people who are genuinely ill, who have disabilities, who have obvious needs. I shouldn't have to say that because I think that's a given. But I do have to keep saying it, and then somebody turns the radio on, doesn't hear that bit, and then go, oh, you're tarring everybody with the same breath. It's not easy to get, but no, it's not for everybody. But you don't need that many people who get through the net and are able to claim a benefit. If you are there will be some kind of benefit you're entitled to. To get the top tier of sickness benefit, there are a lot of hurdles and hoops that you've got to go through. Phil says, I hope you read this out for balance. I'm tired of people stating how easy it is to get sickness benefit. Maybe it has been for some, but my experience was considerably different. I was pensioned off early due to ill health. After more than 30 years with the same employer, I had to go through numerous appointments with health companies like Capita and Atos, etc., where every facet of my life and health was discussed. That included seeing specialists, as well as me having to pay to see 2 private doctors and my GP, all of whom supported my ill health issues. Eventually, I was granted ill health retirement. I was therefore entitled to apply for benefits, and the number of hurdles I had to jump through was utterly ridiculous, not to mention tiring, humiliating and degrading. My claims and ill health were supported by numerous doctors, but my claims were turned down. I had to attend several tribunals to fight my case. One tribunal alone lasted 7 hours, spread over 2 days, being grilled by 2 judges before my claims were supported and I was finally granted benefits. So please, it's far from easy to get benefits generally, because it really isn't. I'd give everything up to get my health back, and I'm more than happy to read that, Phil. I always think it's a given that, yeah, of course, as Phil, I think, identifies in his message, there will be some people, despite Phil's experience, who sail through the process, genuine or otherwise, who sail through and manage to get there. But it's not easy, and nobody is saying it is easy. There are certain benefits that are more accessible than others. I think that's true. When you get into the mental health territory, then you're in the tricky situation. 69% of those claimants at the moment of universal credit health claims involve mental health problems. And that's where, no matter how many specialists in the world you want to bring in, it's very difficult to say you don't have a mental health issue. But make of the figures whatever you will, nearly 3 million people are now out of work due to long-term health problems. I mean, the question I want to know is what is the health problem? Is it mental health? Is that it? Is it somebody who's not like Phil, who's got other issues going on? 0344 499 1000. By the way, brand new Voice of Doom coming in a moment. And this one for me is going to be a little bit different. It's a little bit different, this Voice of Doom. For those who don't know, they're going, what's the Voice of Doom, eh? What are you talking about, son? It's the mystery voice bit, but with a political angle. I'll tell you why it's a bit different in a couple of moments.
Safest form of travel is aircraft. So whenever there's an incident with an aircraft or anything to do with rides, the press jump all over it. So let's get the first thing straight there. But we are so much governed by health and safety rules that everything has to be perfect. And so the same should affect other industries and local government and government.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So it's a brand new mystery, brand new Voice of Doom. We haven't played this one before. Here's what's different about this. Normally, I know who the voice is beforehand, because I've been part of the big, very special, important meeting that we have to decide who the new voice is going to be. So yesterday the voice got one. Somebody identified it. But I don't know. I've not even heard this yet. So I genuinely don't know whose voice this is. So, OK, have a listen.
Closest possible relationship.
Oh. Let's hear that again.
Closest possible relationship.
Some people are going to say Rishi Sunak. It's not Rishi Sunak, though. But it's got a bit of the Rishi about it. Don't call in, by the way, because there ain't no prize. You can message in 87222 if you want to have a crack at this, and we'll reveal all on the other side of the news if we get the right answer. Let's have another listen.
Closest possible relationship.
Nope. One more time, Dave.
Closest possible relationship.
I ain't got a Scooby, mate. If you think you know 87222, give it a go. Yeah, that's tricky. And I'm going to make sure I don't know at all until we get a right answer. We might get one on the other side of the news. If we do, we'll reveal all. If not, it will roll over to Monday. Peter in Suffolk says, Ian, when did this idea come from? That we were all well off in the 70s. I worked to get my home, selling my car to do it. I had second-hand furniture, no holidays. Suggest to the youngsters of today. Yeah, it's true. It wasn't easy, was it? And not everybody did buy their own home in the 70s, or in my sister's case, it was probably the 80s or early 90s. Either way, it was. But simultaneously, it also wasn't controversial to go, oh, we're going to meet, we get married. We might not get married, but, we're going to be together, we're going to buy a house together. And back then, I know somebody said this recently, that, most people thought about buying a house. Nobody thought about buying a brand new car, because buying a brand new car, that really was topped a big price tag on a brand new car. Now anyone can buy a brand new car. It's about 50 quid deposit and away you go. It might cost you £500 a month to pay it off, but buying a house is really tricky. That's become something where the deposits are huge, the cost of the house is huge. Average house price, I heard it today, 300 and something thousand pounds. Madness. Phil's in Hertfordshire on long-term sickness. Phil, what have you got for us? Hi.
Good afternoon, Ian. Right, long-term sickness.
Yeah.
It's like the boat's coming over, isn't it? It's an incentive. A bad back is very, very hard to prove.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if they were self-employed, I bet they wouldn't be having bad backs, would they? Because they're not going to get nothing if they don't work and go sign off sick with a bad back.
Good point. Yeah.
I'm self-employed, Ian, and I don't want the amount of times I've gone to work where probably if I was employed by a company, I probably could have gone sick.
100%. You don't do it. It's like my job's the same. If you don't work, you don't get paid.
You don't get paid, exactly.
I always say to people, when I go on holiday, it costs me twice to go on holiday. The cost of the holiday and the fact that I don't get paid when I'm on holiday.
Exactly. And then because you work hard and you might do well for yourself, people say, oh, you're lucky. No.
Yeah.
We're not lucky at all.
Yeah.
But the benefit thing is, there's no deterrent, is there? And it becomes a trap.
Yeah.
People go on the benefits, they adjust their lifestyle accordingly.
Sure.
And they probably do reasonably well out of it. And I've seen what your previous caller said about the big flat screen TVs, all the beer cans outside. I've seen it. I've witnessed it.
Yeah.
Why want to go to work. So, yeah, you know...
It's that group of people, isn't it? It's not the ones most in need who we all want to help.
Absolutely.
It's not. It's that group of people that aren't the most in need but somehow find themselves in receipt of this stuff.
Absolutely.
I like yourself, like you said yourself, Phil. Certainly growing up, I know who those families are. They absolutely exist. It's nonsense to say they don't.
Yeah, and it's a bit like the human rights law when that first came in. When that first came out, and the people that it was to represent and protect was bang on.
Yeah.
But it gets abused.
Spot on, Phil. Thank you very much for that great call. This one comes in. This is a sobering thought. Steve in Birmingham. I am disabled, an amputee with heart disease, and had a pacemaker defibrillator fitted last year. My wife has AS, an autoimmune disease, but we both work because that's what we need to do to provide for our family and keep a roof over our heads. Steve, thank you. And Steve is the very, in my world, Steve shouldn't have to go to work because that's the person, absolutely the person that I want to help. That's exactly the person that we should feel proud that we have a civilised system that will assist somebody in Steve's position. But he wants to do all right for himself and look after his family, so he goes to work. I mean, that must be, I don't know any more of Steve's circumstances than what he's just said there on that message. But I would imagine, Steve, there are challenges that you face in going to work with the issues that you've got and the issues your wife have got. I doff my cap to you, sir. Thank you. Voice of Doom on the other side of the news. Is there a winner out there? Have another listen to the voice.
Closest possible relationship.
No, still don't know. I genuinely do not know who that is, OK? Normally, I told you, I'm there at the big meeting, big executive meeting we have for this every time we have a new voice. I wasn't able to be present there today because I was eating chips. So there it is. If you think you know, 87222 is the number. You can message in there. Lots to come in the next section, including tech. We're going to talk tech as well. There's some amazing tech stories. We're going to be joined by Mark Selman, tech correspondent from The Times, in the next section. Right now, 3 o'clock, let's get the latest news headlines.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome. 0344 499 1000, 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. We are talking about ministers urging reform to tackle rising mental health benefit claims. It is off the scale. Whatever the reasons behind it, the bill is unsustainable. Liz Kendall warning against writing people off, and a councillor facing a backlash over controversial remarks comparing mental health as the new bad back problem. We spoke to him a little earlier. Do you concur? Also this afternoon, warnings of a potential stagflation crisis grow as the UK faces a problem with growth paired with high inflation raising concerns over economic resilience and household finances. An awful lot to say about that. It's a pretty grey area at the moment, and when I say grey, I mean not so much that we can't work it out. It's just a grim area. And the Tech Roundup returns, looking at the debate over school phone bans and mental health, a minister's praise for Chinese AI firm DeepSeek, and a backlash as Google drops its pledge against using AI for weapons and surveillance. More on that as well. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. So, before we get into it, the mystery voice. Before the news, we played you this voice.
Closest possible relationship.
Do you know, a lot of people... Do you know who that is? A lot of people guess Prince William. It is not Prince William. It is not Chris Philp. Tobias Elwood, no. Stephen Barclay, no. George Osborne, that went through my... Because I don't know the answer to this. George Osborne, I thought, could it be a little bit Osborne? David Lammy, no. Theresa May, when she had a cough, no. Dominic Raab, it was not. John Culshaw, no. David Cameron, no. Can we hear the voice again, Dave?
Closest possible relationship.
Man alive, who's that? Did somebody... Oh, somebody said Dominic Raab. Yeah, that went through my head as well. No, it's not him. In fact, we didn't get a correct answer, which means it rolls over to Monday when it returns for day 2. Now, the Bank of England has forecasted a new era of stagflation for Britain. 100 days on from Rachel Reeves' budget, the bank has slashed its prediction for UK growth this year by half, just to 0.75%. Let's have a chat now with George Magnus, former chief economist at UBS, author and economist, and all-round good bloke. George, good afternoon to you.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon to you.
Nice to have you with us. I'm always confused by this. You know, a chancellor will stand up and go, you know, we're going to be the second fastest economy in the G7 or something like that. And you think, well, that's rather good. That puts us right up there. And then the Bank of England go, no, we're not going to really move much at all. In the short term, at the very least, its growth predictions reduced to 0.75%. I mean, who am I meant to look to for the truth on these stories?
Well, I mean, what the bank has going for it, obviously, is constitutional independence. Yeah. So it's not beholden to the government, and you know, it's allowed to pretty much say what it wants. Obviously, you expect the Treasury, even though the Treasury is kind of kept in line, really, in terms of the Office of Budget Responsibility. So, you know, when Rachel Reeves got up to make her budget, and when she gets up next month to make her spring statement, I mean, she can't kind of make it up, because the OBR will basically, have done a kind of run the rule against, the government's own projections. But it's, the bank doesn't always get it right. Obviously, forecasters don't. But the news or the message that the bank has, if you strip away, just to the bare bones of what it's trying to say, is that, we're in a bit of trouble.
Well, are we alone in this? I mean, we often talk about global components to these stories, and sometimes there's clearly a downturn across Western economies or similar-sized economies. Is it that, or are we alone in this one?
It's definitely much more a kind of a European thing than it is global at this juncture. I mean, who knows what Donald Trump may do to the American economy over 4 years. But at the moment, the American economy is on a bit of a roll. It's it's created a lot of jobs. It's got good productivity. It's got huge, world-beating companies that are at the forefront of tech, et cetera, et cetera. And things are not all that bad in some of the other kind of developed market economies. But I think it's in Europe really that the problem is. So Europe in particular, I think, has issues of low growth and kind of stagnation. But I think that, much as we like to think sometimes that we're doing better than lots of countries in Europe, actually, unfortunately, in the last year or two and now, I mean, we're probably not doing. We're doing more badly than they're doing badly, should we say.
Yeah, and there's the issue. And it was interesting, too, sort of almost conflicting pieces of news yesterday. We had that interest rate drop. That is welcomed by, those that have mortgages and the like. But then, of course, about an hour later, we hear that the growth forecast has been forecast downwards. We can expect more inflation, which, of course, generally speaking, doesn't bode well for interest rates. So it's quite a tricky picture to keep hold of here.
It is, and I think it's a bit of a sort of a sucker punch for the Chancellor, really, because as I think everybody knows, and your listeners probably sort of fed up of hearing, but the government, obviously has a mantra, which is, they're going to go for growth agenda, everything is about growth. And actually, even though things like Heathrow, third runway, Oxford and Cambridge corridor, and other kind of programs which the government has announced, I mean, these things over the next 10, 15 years probably will have some kind of beneficial effects, one imagines, and the construction itself will be good. I mean, there's a long gestation period, a long lag before they kick in. And in the meantime, nobody really has kind of a strong feel that actually anything of any kind of dynamic, kind of growth machine is really kind of working. And meantime, obviously, oil and gas prices are up, and that's going to hurt people's budgets too.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, of course, I get the very real sense that the government has sort of been spooked a little bit over the last 4 or 5 weeks because they talked a lot about growth. We know the budget didn't appear to have been quite as welcome as the Labour government was hoping it would be. I think even the governor yesterday did reference that, some of this will be down to what Rachel Reeves announced in that budget. But and now the government are talking about, we're going to house building, Heathrow, we might even start digging for oil, which, I mean, all of this goes very much against what they told us they were about in another department, net zero and the like. Yeah, we don't care what, we're going to build on it, we'll grow it, we don't care what it is now. I don't know, we'll probably have opium fields somewhere in Lincolnshire at this rate, who knows? But nonetheless, that appears to be the word on the street from Labour, but putting all of that into action is a very different thing.
Yeah, and I think the big problem here, in my opinion, actually, is I think the government came into office. I mean, OK, it's only been 6 months, right? So they still have time to make amends. But I think the problem is they came into office not very well prepared for all of the things that they've told us, incessantly about the black hole and about what a dire state public services are in. And I mean, we all knew this stuff before. But actually, when it came down to kind of, you're in pole position now, you've got all your hands, your hands on the levers of government policy, go to work. It turns out, actually, it looks like, they were really not really very well prepared, or they boxed themselves into positions which they found it very difficult to get out, like ruling out, kind of vast areas of potential revenue increases. So they've been forced to really put the squeeze on companies that they rely on to give us the investment that's going to give the growth. So there's an incompatibility there, which is something that they're going to have to try to work out.
Yes, somebody, I guess, previously kind of made the point that just not being the Conservatives isn't really enough to run a country. And I think there was a very real sense that perhaps subliminally or otherwise, that was their thinking. We can't do any worse. We're not that lot. We're a new broom, etc. Some have said there's very little experience on the front bench, and that may well be a factor. Who knows? But Rachel Reeves, people can have their satire over front benchers and high-profile politicians, but I don't doubt she wants the country to grow. It would be very strange if she didn't. But again, it comes back to that, thinking it, wanting it, and doing it are very different things. Something has tangibly got to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had a golden opportunity in the budget to try to really make a break with the past and to introduce reform. reform to the tax system, reform to incentives, maybe reform to the entire way in which we tax property and land in such a way that would encourage home building and so on. But I think they didn't take that opportunity, and I'm not sure whether it'll come back again. But we'll see. Obviously, at the moment, the Chancellor's big problem is that she's kind of run out of what we call fiscal room or fiscal space because of what's happened to interest rates and what's happened to tax revenues. So, from a government point of view and from a citizen's point of view, I mean, the economic news in the next few months isn't going to get much better, I'm afraid.
What is your take, George, on these kind of wealth taxes? I'm slightly seduced by some of these. I speak with a sort of capitalist brain, but I every now and again, and this happened just in the week, somebody, a very wealthy person, said to me, if they just put a 1% tax on people who earn over 3 million quid or people whose value, in fact, I think it was over 10 million or something. And you'll be familiar with these kind of proposals, or if all you have to do is stick 1% on that girl, and it will raise 26 billion pounds, and these numbers are thought out. Why would a chancellor not just do, if it was that easy, wouldn't Rachel Reeves just go, OK, if you're worth over 10 million quid, it's an extra 1% on your tax, and it's going to make X, Y, Z?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about wealth taxes or wealth tax of some description, is empirically. I mean, if you look at the experience of other countries, including, for example, France, which has experimented with this, I mean, they actually don't raise a lot of revenue. I mean, there may be a political reason why governments may want to do this, so that they can show to the people that they're being fair, just, even-handed, etc., etc. The rich have to pay their way, and so on and so forth. So there may be a political reason why you want to do this, but actually the idea that this is going to fill the gap, that's going to fund, the inexorable growth in, NHS spending and other wealth benefits and so on. That's just a fantasy. That's just not true, and it's not really something which other countries' experiences with wealth taxes teach us. Is actually a lucrative source of enduring revenue, because basically people find ways of getting around it, or they take their money abroad.
And I suppose, George, if you say, OK, let's take people who are worth over 10 million, so it's not like we're, hoovering up just the higher rate of taxpayer. We're going for the real millionaires here. We'll have a 2% on anything over the 10 million or 5% over the 10 million. On the face of it, you go, well, that's fine, isn't it? Because, on the 10 million, you're still only paying, if you add in the national insurance bit, you pay on your tax 47%, something like that at the top rate. It might be higher, in that ballpark. But if it's over 10, so all your other stuff, you're under 10 million, it's all protected. That's fantastic. Everything over 10 million. I guess the answer is there ain't that many people who have over 10 million. Would that be, in the grander scale, would that be the answer?
I think so it's sort of A and B. A, that there aren't that many people. The universe of that kind of people is not that big. And B, they're sufficiently rich and employ very good accountants and lawyers and have global presence and global interest that they can probably take their wealth away from the kind of long arm of the Treasury. So that's kind of those are the reasons really that this doesn't really work. Economically, okay, politically, there may be a reason why you may want to be seen to be doing something, of that nature. But fundamentally, the big things that we all hanker after in this country in terms of public goods and services are so big, and they reach so many kind of parts of the country that actually we all somehow have to pay our share. We have a progressive tax system, so it's absolutely correct that poor people should not have to contribute or contribute as much, etc., etc. But the idea that you can rule out, as the government has done, income tax, VAT, corporation tax, national insurance, and so on. I mean, that was never really going to wash. And I think somehow the government probably is going to have to climb down on that at some stage.
And there are reasonable kind of moral arguments about, I mean, the rich would always say the rich, anyone in the top rate, not even the 10 millionaires, will contribute disproportionately in terms of total taxation to the Treasury. There's that interesting stat that kind of wavers a little bit, but, the top percentage of earners pay something like 30-40% of all income, these kind of statistics. And you can reasonably say, even if somebody is rich, that doesn't mean to say they have to pay for everything. Because that would be a curious world as well, wouldn't it? If we just said, well, it doesn't matter, you don't have to go to work, don't worry, we just get the rich people to pay for it. That would also become honest. It's like going out with somebody who's worth a few quid and saying they should buy the rounds all night in the pub.
Quite. I mean, there's only so much you can milk people, for political reasons and economic reasons before actually you just say, well, actually, this is really not going to answer the question about, how we're going to fund what we really think we want in terms of public goods. So you do have to be a little bit more innovative. I mean, some of the things you can do, you can broaden the tax base, whether it's income or not necessarily income tax, which is already quite broad, but say, VAT or other kinds of taxation and fees, which means that you don't have to kind of increase levies on people that hard. Yeah. You can do all sorts of things. You could reform, the property and land tax system to incentivize house building and to make sure that we can actually restructure the tax system so that it works better for everybody. So lots of things you can do, but you need political leadership, bold political leadership to do that.
Yeah, I think I read today that the French are putting, I mean, this was largely for an environmental reason, unbelievable taxation onto certain vehicles. I think I read the headline that 90,000 quid or something if you buy the wrong Porsche. I know that will probably disturb you, George, of course, with your 911 going down there around the fun roads of the UK. But you take my point. I mean, that you could go there, I suppose, with those kind of incredible taxation implementations, but again, I mean, I don't imagine that would raise an awful lot of money either in the grander scheme.
No, well, I think this is the issue. There are lots of kind of, what should we say, popular or populist kind of ways in which people think that, oh, well, why don't we, they've got a lot of money, or this will work, and actually the amount of revenues that you kind of bring in is pretty skinny. I mean, ultimately, what you really need to do, and the government is right. The more the economy grows, the more revenues will accrue, and the less you have to actually raise people's taxation. Yeah. You have room to actually cut it. But actually, getting that growth to happen means you really need to. I mean, it's a long conversation about why don't we have so much growth. One of the principal reasons is that our investment rate is so weak. So we really need to encourage business investment, and actually taxing firms is not really the way to get them to do that.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, George, it's been great having you on. I should apologise, by the way, for suggesting you drive around in a Porsche. It's a fleet of Ferraris you own, of course. I forgot that.
Well, of course it is. Especially exactly. The lanes where I live.
What a schoolboy error I made there. George, lovely to have you on. Have a cracking weekend. George Magnus, economist and author, with us on the programme. 0344 499 1000.
Kate, Lego, offensive, who knew?
Because this comes from the Gender and Sexuality Network at the Science Museum. If you think that analogy through, if you had non-binary Lego, it wouldn't work at all because it wouldn't stick together.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, look, you know what we should do, Kate, is to coin the phrase lesbian Lego on the basis that definitely wouldn't work. I mean, how would that stick together?
Yeah, well, I know.
That's something that's now festering in your mind for the rest of the day, isn't it?
Well, I think it is, and I'm glad we're talking about all the issues that really matter.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's go to this one from Cliff in Berkshire, who says, welfare is a difficult one. I wonder if it became easier to obtain sick benefits during COVID when they couldn't have face-to-face interviews and assessments. That could be true. Incidentally, I received a letter from the DWP yesterday which annoyed me. It was about the increase in my state pension from April. It wasn't the amount of increase that annoyed me, it was the fact that they called it a benefit. That's a very good point. Something you've literally paid for your entire working life. It's an investment, it's your money. That was the whole point of it. One here from Claire. Reference benefits. I hope you read this message out. My husband and I had former friends who knew what they could claim and what to say so they could get those benefits. They have claimed benefits for over 35 years and they had the audacity to say that I was stupid to work. The couple even brought their kids up while on benefits. The couple even complained to us about how their children would have to work. We just said it was the way of life. Yeah. I mean, it's not hard, is it, to get your, to a basic grasp of what the kind of Western living is all about. You could, if you watch one of those old kind of documentaries about some tribe in the Amazon or something, you could go jungle bound and live in that kind of world and give it a go. And I can see the attractions in that. Maybe we should all just buy a nice little island and sit there and, whittle wood and catch fish, light some fires, have some fun. I don't know. Is that possible? You could, but that's not the life we're in. We live in a world where there are cogwheels and machinery that makes it function, and we're all kind of part of it in varying ways. So to opt out of it, which some people, and the example Claire gave there, clearly suggests the same thing, to literally opt out of it and say, no, I'm not going to be part of that, even though you're meant to be part of that. If you can't be part of that, it's a given. We understand that. Everybody wants to help those who are sick, in need of benefits, who have problems and challenges and issues. Shouldn't need to be said, but I'm going to have to keep on saying it. Steve is down in London on this point. Steve, what have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Earlier you said that there's no solution to this problem, or no one knows the solution to the problem of people claiming they're mentally ill and claiming benefits. Well, there's a very simple solution, and it's private employment insurance. So people pay a premium each month, and if they get unemployed, then the insurance company will cover them.
Yeah.
And that way, if people keep claiming unemployment, their premium will go up, and the employment contract, the insurance contract will probably have a limit on how many months they can claim, or how many months they can claim will depend on how much premium they've paid each month.
What do you think the future looks like, though, Stephen? I mean, you're suggesting something there, but the numbers that we're looking at and the increase in, was it 40% increase in long-term sickness over 4 or 5 years, the direction of travel is that that's going to get a whole lot worse.
Yeah, because we're stuck with a socialist system. We're stuck with a socialist NHS. We're stuck with socialist welfare system in toto. So it's pretty bleak. Unless someone comes in like maybe reform and privatise. Is it over? You can't just privatise overnight. It'll have to be phased in. But gradually brings in a privatised system, we're basically doomed.
I mean, there are elements, you know, the private ATOS, Capita, these kind of companies, that, you know, they are involved in the wider system of assessment. So some of them are already there.
Yeah, but if you've got a socialist system, it's going to skew the private system, because if people get it for free, then the private companies just can't compete with that. People are always going to opt out to the private and go to the free system.
The problem is there's no way, when it comes to mental health issues, and this story is, I suppose, largely about mental health issues, there's no way, really, is there, of ever ascertaining whether somebody, just to put it in the bluntest way, that everybody is a genuine case. There's no, you can't, you know, there's obviously people who have severe mental health issues. There's people on, you know, on a journey of trying to get better. There's so many examples. But this big chunk of people who have not been diagnosed beyond their word of saying, I have mental health issues, that's the group that's hard to identify.
Yeah, but that won't be a problem, because in a private system that won't be a problem, because if people claim unemployment benefits, they will have to pay a higher premium. So there will be disincentive for them to falsely claim mental health problems. And as I said, you'll sign a health insurance contract. You'll probably have different tiers. You pay this a month, you can get unemployment benefit for this long. You pay a bit more, you can get unemployment benefit a bit longer. So there'll be a built-in disincentive for people to falsely claim they're mentally ill.
Well, look, listen, in the absence of any other idea, maybe somebody needs to look at that. Thank you for that, Stephen, down there in London. This from Jim in Kirkcaldy says, listening to your show as a 2-year unemployed, fully qualified engineer, able to work, willing to work, need to work, applied for hundreds of jobs, fit and healthy 56-year-old, I receive 0 benefits and live on savings. Age discrimination, or do I just give up and move to Dubai? I tell you what, Jim, the latter it looks increasingly tasty to many. One here from Leslie: I would have assumed that the government insist on these sick people providing evidence of their condition from doctors or hospitals, preferably from 2 separate doctors. Otherwise, they don't get benefits. No excuse unless genuine. They should also have 6-month reviews with providing the same evidence. If this process was taken seriously, sick people would get off their backsides and serve as a deterrent. We are far too soft and too spoiled in this country. And I think the problem there, as we've heard from many people, is that if you are somebody who's sick and you know, genuinely have a problem, you often have to jump through hoops, and you have all the evidence. And as a previous communicator with us said, you know, even going to kind of judicial reviews and having to sit there for hours arguing your case. You've got the doctors, you've got the private doctors, the GP, you've got medical clinician, all manner of characters backing up your case. You still can't get the benefit. You think, this is a weird system, right? So we've got, in some cases, people who are desperately in need of the acknowledgement of their difficulties, their challenges, or even their disability, can't get jack. And then you've got others who somehow seem to penetrate the system. We don't know, nobody seems to know how this works, not fully. My best guess is that it's overwhelmed. The system is so overwhelmed, they can't keep up with it, and some people, on average, get waved through. Not everybody's on the top tier of benefit, by the way. I mean, the top tier is, you know, a very different ball game from just simply claiming a little bit of benefit. So you've got to go through that, but not everybody is looking for the top tier. They just want a bit of, you know, a bit. To some, that is absolutely fine. 0344 499 1000. Why is the UK too sick to work? Why have we got just shy of 3 million people out of the workforce due to long-term health problems? Why do you think that would be? And 69% of universal credit health claims involve mental health problems. So are we just psychologically collapsing? Is it the world we're living, the cost of living crisis, bit of COVID thrown in? Why are we not seeing a similar pattern in other countries as well? There's that question to throw in. What is behind all of those really disturbing headlines? And the bill, the current bill, is looking at a projected welfare overspend this year alone of over £8.5 billion. You can't keep that going. This is just the welfare budget, remember. Not the NHS budget, not the education budget. Think about how short we are in all of those areas as well. Where the hell does this story go? How do you appease all of that other than a 60% rate of tax? 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on that? We're going to talk to Mark Selman in a moment, tech correspondent at The Times. Some incredible stories out there, including that one. You may have clocked this one this week. Mark has written a piece on this as well. That school curbing the use of mobile phones in school apparently does not improve children's mental health. I sense when I read that is only part. There's more to that story. There must be. We'll talk to Mark on that and some of the other big tech stories of the day, including AI. It's back in the news. Details coming next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. I think Peter Cardwell's here at 4 o'clock. Is it Peter Cardwell? It is Peter Cardwell's here on Drive at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Let's talk technology, and there's lots to get through. Mark Selman is technology correspondent over there at The Times. Afternoon to you, Mark.
Afternoon.
It's interesting, isn't it? Remember when tech stories used to be sort of on the geek pages of newspapers and specialist magazines? They were almost top shelf territory. Now, of course, technology news dominates the front pages. There's so much of it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's inside all our lives, and we carry it around with us.
Absolutely. And this story I thought was interesting, and I know you wrote a piece on this as well. Schools' curbs on phones apparently didn't make much difference, certainly to kids' mental health problems. What's the wider picture here?
The wider picture is that on their own, they don't make a big impact, and I think the researchers were making the point that they're not saying don't do it, but actually doing it in isolation, because those kids are using their phones so much outside of school.
Yeah.
Just doing it inside school is not enough.
Yeah, doesn't really make a lot of difference. So, I mean, it seems there are 20,000 different rules depending on which school you talk to. Some ban them altogether, some allow use of phones at certain times, others encourage phones as part of lessons, etc. I mean, the wider story here, I suppose, Mark, is phones are irredeemably with us, and for many, phones and certainly tablets, you're often, my kids do their homework on a tablet because it's sent to them on a tablet.
Yeah, indeed, and I think this is something that schools are wrestling with, but they're also wrestling with the impacts of social media and distraction in schools, caused by the devices. So a lot of the teachers I spoke to made the point that those in the study were not schools that actually instituted a full ban, i.e. you can't bring the phones into school at all. So that was one thing they mentioned. And the other thing was obviously that schools are trying to influence behaviour of parents outside of school.
Yeah.
And that's really where most of the action takes place.
And that's the problem, isn't it? It's, I suppose, schools are wearing more than one hat on this one because they clearly don't want kids distracted. They want kids maybe to use their phone for some calculations in a maths lesson, as an obvious example. But it's really, the story to me is really ultimately about social media.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard to divorce the two. And it's also, it's a struggle when you're needing it for schoolwork, as you say. But I think that the school leaders are coming to a consensus that they're going to have to put stronger restrictions on it.
Yeah.
And that's the way things are going.
Let's move to this story as well. And I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot to get our teeth into here. Chinese firm the Chinese AI firm DeepSeek will be good for Britain, according to the science minister. Now, that's an interesting kind of move because and you can tell us a little bit more about this, Mark. When DeepSeek was first talked about a week or so ago, it seemed to just sort of shoot out the blue. I'm sure it didn't, but that's certainly how the headlines read.
Yes, it has been bubbling away for some time, but the thing that really got everyone's attention is that the stock market took a plunge when it came to the tech stocks, and I think that's where most people took notice. But it's taken a while for everyone to digest the impact of it, and I think one of the things that's come out of it is that they were able to produce results on a par with the top American led AI programs, but using much less power, and they were developed using a lot less resources. So the impact of that is for those that don't have access to huge amounts of compute, it was a positive, and I'm afraid that we're in that boat.
Yeah.
We're a sort of middle nation when it comes to compute. We're actually quite a good nation when it comes to data and talent on AI, but compute is something that we are restricted to and don't have as much as the big companies.
Yeah, and I guess, everybody kind of discombobulates when the Chinese have done something as distinct from anyone else. It's like, oh my goodness, Chinese AI, that sounds like that's a Netflix show waiting to happen, isn't it? I mean, this is sort of thing that nightmares are made of. They're going to be spying on us, and anything you ask it'll be data-based and used against you at some point. This empire, which of course, let's face it, it's not a great system of governance over there in China. They do have the weight to punch globally. Should we be worried on that score? Is there a security reason to be scared of? I mean, America and all manner of different characters around the world can come out with their own AI tools, and they are famously already in use in offices up and down the country. But when the Chinese do it, we all begin to shiver a bit.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that came out of this was essentially how AI is being used in the geopolitical fight between the superpowers, and there is a race going on. But one of the other things that DeepSeek did was it released it open source, which meant they essentially gave the program to the world to essentially develop and play with as they wanted to. So it can be adapted, and has been adapted even by American companies to incorporate it into their services, and they're already doing that because it's so cheap to run.
Yeah.
People like it because it's cheap. But there have been warnings of using it when you're actually using the Chinese version, which is obviously having to be censored. There are also data privacy issues that have been people have been warned about.
Yeah.
So you just go into that with your eyes wide open.
Yeah. And it's always interesting. We talk about this a lot on this feature, Mark, that, you know, we can talk about, I don't know, banning a certain mobile phone or cars or whatever, but you'd have to ban an awful lot of other tech if you really wanted to eradicate any Chinese influence. I mean, your iPhone, for goodness sake, might be an American company, but there's a lot of components in that phone that certainly didn't come out of America.
Yeah, so it's a dual, like all technologies, dual use, and this is the debate on at the moment. Do you restrict the technology going to China? Which what we've seen is actually when you do that, it creates an innovation because they had to innovate. And there's a real debate going on about export controls to China of American chips and the high-end chips. And there's we don't know where it's settled. I mean, I don't think the Trump administration is going to relax that anytime soon.
Yeah.
But there is a real debate as to whether China should be restricted of having access to that technology.
Indeed. And a final one on Google, who've updated its AI ethical guidelines. This has disturbed some people, Mark. What's the story?
Yeah, so they've had a long-standing principle of not letting their AI be used for weapon systems or surveillance. And they quietly changed that wording in their AI principles earlier this week. And it has alarmed those who are worried about the proliferation of AI for use in weapon systems and for essentially, you know, destructive purposes and surveillance. But interestingly, and this is linked to the previous topic on DeepSeek, it was framed in the sense that this is, you know, AI is the world is changing and it's moving into geopolitical spheres. So essentially, the tech companies are moving much closer to what the government wants in America, and I think that you're seeing that you know, the military element of AI is going to be a very important geopolitical tool.
Indeed, we will watch with interest. Mark, thank you very much for your time, sir. Really appreciate that. Mark Selman, he's the technology correspondent over there at The Times. Thank you to him. Over to you. A lot of comment coming in, by the way, on the Lego story. It was the Science Museum that said Lego was, did they say it was anti-LGBT? It was, yeah, that was essentially what they said. And everyone was scratching their heads going, what the... Really? Why is the Science Museum... What does it even mean? Lego is anti... It's Lego, mate, you know. Nick in Nottingham has extended this. He says, I find Jenga horribly asexual, with nothing to intersect and everything just lying on top of each other. It's a fair point. As for Meccano, that's like bondage with all those fastenings and bits of metal. On a serious note, I'm a scientist and utterly horrified with the museum previously known as the Science Museum. Yeah, and don't even talk to me, Nick, about snakes and ladders. We all know where that means. 0344 499 1000. Chris in Ottershaw says what we need to understand is that sick notes equal sick votes. Could be something in that. And another one here that comes in from Alan in Merseyside. These people who won't work think they are on early retirement, getting paid probably more than a pensioner and not working. Great, says Alan. Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed picture out there, there's no doubt about it. 0344 499 1000. Back with more calls coming from you next.
So you have more of an international welfare state. And I think that the Conservatives have a great deal to answer for, especially in the last parliamentary term. Immigration skyrocketed to unprecedented levels. And Alex, all too often we were told that our immigration system attracts the brightest and the best. We have a rigorous, highly selective immigration system. And that is what people wanted, especially those who voted for Brexit back in June 2016. That was not the immigration system that was introduced.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Cardwell's going to be with us in a few moments. We'll chat to Peter about what is happening on the Drive Time show. Let's just wrap up with some comments from you. Simon says, I've worked with people who are mentally ill. Honestly, I'd let people in that condition stay at home. It can be a minefield working alongside someone whose mental health is bad. And that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because Simon says that not to be unkind. I think he's talking about the welfare of individuals and the difficulty if your mental health condition is at a certain level or a certain manifests in a certain way. It can be really difficult to assimilate in a workforce. Of course it can. And maybe the kindest thing is somebody is at home. I mean, I have no truck in tax pounds being spent to look after somebody who has a severe mental health problem, no more than I would someone who has a severe disability problem. It's a given, right? But I can see the difficulties. Why don't we have compulsory PT sessions for people on the dole? Keep them fit and well. There is that. Mark's in Hayburn, who says everyone calls our benefit system socialist in the former socialist blocs. They said, here's a job, end of. Even if you did have to move hundreds of miles away. They didn't give money away. There used to be a joke, didn't there? How do you make an Eastern European laugh? Tell them about our welfare system, was the answer, because it was just unbelievable. That I remember watching a Russian woman now works in the UK, lives in the UK, and she couldn't believe, when she moved it, she could not believe that that you got paid when you had a baby. It was just unbelievable to her. I mean, imagine that somebody, you didn't know that information, you learn it for the first time. Well, you get paid by the government to have a baby? Really? You don't just get paid, they continue to pay you. And then there'll be a child benefit as well along the way for the rest of the child. Really? Extraordinary. Maternity leave, you get paid for that? Wow. Susan is in Lancashire on that tricky issue of welfare. Susan, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I just wanted to tell you about my brother. My brother is 69 years old.
Okay.
He hasn't had a job since he was 23. His children have always had more than mine. In fact, I once got told by him that I was stupid for working when he got more on benefits. And I just said, well, it's called paying your way. But I must add that he has worked. He's worked on the side all these years in pubs, building, different things. So he is willing to work.
As long as it's cash in hand.
Yes, and he gets his benefits. And a lot of these companies who employ people who are on benefits do not pay them the going rate.
Yeah.
So they are getting away with it as well. There should be a massive clampdown on the companies. There's a company in Lancashire, and most of the people, the Polish people, the immigrants, and most of them, as you know, word goes round, are on benefits. You know, and this is what's letting everybody down. If these people employed people properly with a proper wage, perhaps it would make people work.
But you're right. But some of those companies, you're absolutely right. One of the reasons we've got a high benefit bill, I know this is different to sickness benefit and the like, but is that if companies aren't paying enough, then the government have to make up the shortfall. So essentially, if you work in a big supermarket, I spoke to a retired woman, Susan, in a supermarket, and she was telling me she only works there a couple of days a week because her pension isn't enough money. So she has to top it up. Now, that's great that she does that. She said she quite likes it. It's fine. It's a few extra quid. But if you're getting paid by a big company and it's not enough to live on, and then the government have to pay the difference, then that's a bit like the government paying the wages of the company, right?
But like I'm on the pension now, and I get a reduced pension because when my child was born, I was 6 weeks without work. He now gets more money than me because he gets pension credit, etc., and I don't. They need, like I said, I'd paid tax and insurance all my life, and he gets more than me. I must add, I've not spoken to him for about 30 years.
Have you not?
Because of some of the things he used to say.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. That's
I'm not.
No, as long as you're OK with that, that's the point. Listen, Susan, thank you very much indeed for that. Susan in Lancashire. This comes from Paul. This is, I believe in the welfare system. I believe there's genuine people out there. But it's clear there are people manipulating the system, taking the cash, spinning gate on Sky TV, booze and quads and everything that is ridiculous. We should give the welfare system vouchers that ensures that money from the system is only spent on the main things that people need to survive. That will include gym membership, by the way, and access to open areas to ensure that people have the opportunity to learn and develop, but not to enjoy, as in not for it to be a social life. And Alan down in Essex says, on the subject of Lego bricks reinforcing heterosexuality, has it not occurred to the Science Museum that all Lego bricks have a male and a female component, which is what makes them configurable? Does this mean that Lego is in fact generic? Well, I think that's central to their complaint, that it follows a kind of heteronormative thing. It's a bit bizarre. But while we're on this subject, I would also argue this, that thinking about my kids have got, Lego, but I've got Lego coming all over. There's always a Lego being done. It's on the kitchen table, it's in their bedrooms, it's on a tray, bits of it in dishes. Because sometimes they start one and then they don't finish it. Because everything's about Lego kits now. It used to just be, here's a box of bricks. I would say, and I think I'm right in saying there's fewer black bricks than there are any other colour. Now, I'm just saying that I think there might be a racist issue over there at the Lego empire. In fact, I got a funny feeling that when I bought my little boy the Casper the Ghost set, there was not a single black brick in there. I mean, this is, we need a documentary on this, Peter Cardwell.
Essentially,
this is racism in Lego.
So you bought him the Casper?
Yeah.
And was that in the last few months? Was it the Ghost of Christmas Present?
Stop it. We did build Black Panther, I have to say. So there was no white bricks in that at all. That was a whole lot of black bricks.
The problem with Lego
maybe that was the way they've redeemed themselves, by having a big...
There's not much point in Lego being non-binary. I mean, the point is it's binary, isn't it? It has to be binary. You have to bind to another piece of Lego.
Binds. That is literally the thing with Lego. Did you like Lego growing up?
I loved it, yeah. Duplo, first of all, when I was a little toddler, and then Lego. No, I was a big Lego fan.
Do you know something funny about Lego? We were in the office. We happened to have a real-life, living, breathing American working on the show today. Doesn't happen very often. We actually have an American. Well, we've got no papers to know that she's American. She could be Canadian.
Does she sound American?
Yeah, a little bit. We were talking about different words, and we never bought this one. We were talking about aluminium, aluminum, tomato.
Let's call it the whole thing off.
Right, what's the plural of Lego, Peter? It's Lego, right?
I think it's probably just Lego. It's like Euros.
Not in America, it's not.
Oh?
It's Legos.
Legos. Interesting. I don't like it when people say Euros, because the plural of Euro is Euro.
It's Euro. People say Euros, yeah.
Yes, they do.
In America, it's Lego. Pick your Legos up. Legos.
Pick your Legos up.
No, it's your Lego.
Okay. Well, you know what Churchill said? He said we're two countries divided by a common language.
Divided by a common brick, it seems.
Yes, exactly.
Legos.
Yeah. Well, the question is, what is going to be your legacy?
You're on a roll today.
I'm on a roll. I'm on a roll.
What's happening after 4?
Well, we're talking politics. Britain is facing a new era of stagflation. Also, a really interesting story. We're continuing the debate about legacy. We're talking to the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury as well. And we're talking about a Labour council banning mourners from laying flowers on a grave.
What?
First 7 days after the funeral, that's fine. After that, no more flowers.
You can't put any flowers on the grave?
No, you can't.
Really? What's that, like an anniversary? Or
yes, no, nothing. No more.
What kind of...
They'll be removed.
Who are these weirdos?
I know they're pretty heartless. We'll talk about the sport as well. We'll talk to Bob Seeley, the former Conservative MP and military expert, about Rachel Reeves, and also